He thought it was just a rescue on a rainy night, but this stranger isn't who she says she is. She's a billionaire heiress, running from a scandal that could tear his small town apart. As secrets surface, powerful enemies close in, and the town turns against them. But she's hiding more than her name, and the truth she carries could destroy them both. Can they protect each other when the past they're running from is about to find them? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Thunder cracked overhead as Jack Mercer did his final walkthrough of the garage. The day's work was done: Mrs. Henderson's brake job, the Martinez family's transmission, and old Mr. Cooper's perpetually troublesome carburetor. His tools lay cleaned and organized in their proper places, ready for tomorrow's challenges. Rain drummed against the metal roof, creating a deafening symphony. Jack paused at the main door, his hand hovering over the light switch. The storm had picked up considerably in the last hour, and he couldn't help but worry about Maya getting home safely from her after-school program. But his daughter had texted just minutes ago. She was already at Pastor Ruth's house for their weekly Bible study. A flash of lightning illuminated the garage in stark white, followed immediately by a boom that rattled the windows. Jack shook his head, grateful to be heading home soon. That's when he heard it, the unmistakable sound of tires screeching, the noise carrying even over the thunderstorm's fury. His head snapped up, eyes straining through the sheets of rain visible through the open bay door. The Riverbend Bridge stretched across his field of vision, its aged steel structure disappearing into the gloom. Another flash of lightning revealed a silver sedan moving too fast, its tires losing grip on the wet surface. Jack's heart leaped into his throat as he watched the car fishtail violently. The driver overcorrected, sending the vehicle spinning. With a sickening crunch of metal on metal, the sedan slammed sideways into the bridge's guardrail. Without thinking, Jack grabbed his heavy-duty flashlight from the workbench and sprinted out into the downpour. The rain immediately soaked through his shirt, but he barely noticed as he ran toward the bridge. His boots pounded against the wet pavement, sending up splashes with each step. "Hello?" he shouted, though his voice was nearly lost in the storm. "Can you hear me?" The sedan's front end was crumpled against the guardrail, steam rising from the hood despite the rain. As Jack drew closer, he could see someone moving inside, a woman, slumped over the steering wheel but stirring. The driver's side door was badly dented, and when Jack yanked the handle, it refused to budge. He pressed his face close to the window, trying to get the driver's attention. "Ma'am, can you move?" The woman lifted her head slowly, revealing a face both elegant and dazed. She seemed to be in her mid-40s, with dark hair now plastered to her forehead. Her eyes met Jack's, confusion evident in her expression. Jack saw something that made his blood run cold. Small flames beginning to lick up from under the crumpled hood. The impact must have ruptured the fuel line. "The door's stuck," he shouted, gesturing urgently. "Can you move to the passenger side?" The woman nodded weakly and began shifting across the center console. Jack rushed around to the passenger door, relieved to find it would open. The smell of gasoline was getting stronger. "We need to get you out now," he said firmly, reaching in to help her. She was shaking, whether from shock or cold he couldn't tell. Her expensive-looking blazer was torn at the shoulder, and a thin line of blood trickled from her hairline. Jack wrapped his arms around her waist, supporting her weight as she half climbed, half fell out of the vehicle. They had barely moved 10 feet away when a whoosh of flames erupted from the engine compartment. The woman stumbled, and Jack tightened his grip, practically carrying her further from the burning car. "Thank you," she gasped out, her voice barely audible over the storm and the crackling flames. I don't know what happened. The road was so slick." "Are you hurt?" Jack asked, quickly assessing her for obvious injuries. Besides the cut on her forehead and some bruising already forming on her shoulder, she seemed relatively unscathed. "I don't think so," she said, though her whole body was trembling. "Just shaken up. My name is Lena White." There was something hesitant in the way she gave her name, but Jack was more concerned with getting her out of the rain. In the distance, he could hear sirens approaching. Someone else must have called 911. "I'm Jack Mercer," he replied, shrugging off his work jacket. I own the garage just down there. He draped the jacket over her shoulders, noticing how she pulled it close around herself like armor. The flames from the car were growing higher now, casting an orange glow through the curtain of rain. Jack guided Lena toward his truck, parked in front of the garage. Let's get you somewhere dry. The police and ambulance will be here any minute. She nodded, leaning heavily on his arm as they walked. Despite her disheveled state, there was something distinctly refined about her bearing, like someone used to boardrooms rather than body shops. Her shoes, or what was left of them, looked like they cost more than Jack's monthly mortgage payment. The sirens grew louder as they made their way down the bridge's slight incline. Lightning flashed again, followed by another thunderous boom, making Lena flinch. Jack kept his arms steady around her shoulders, providing silent support as they walked through the tempest. I can't thank you enough, she said softly, looking up at him with rain-streaked features. If you hadn't been there, anyone would have done the same, Jack replied, though they both knew that wasn't necessarily true. Not everyone would have run toward danger in the middle of a storm. Blue and red lights began to strobe through the rain as emergency vehicles approached from both ends of the bridge. Jack could feel Lena tense slightly beside him, though she tried to hide it. The paramedics will want to check you out, he said gently, guiding her toward his truck where they could wait out of the rain. Just to be safe. The ambulance's red and blue lights painted the wet pavement in shifting colors as a paramedic wrapped a silver emergency blanket around Lena White's shoulders. She sat in the back of the vehicle, her expensive blazer soaked through, mascara slightly smudged beneath her eyes. The paramedic checked her pupils with a penlight, while Jack stood nearby, his own clothes dripping. Ma'am, we really should take you to County General for observation, the paramedic insisted, frowning at a small cut on her forehead. Even minor accidents can have hidden complications. I'm fine, really. Lena's voice was steady despite her pale complexion. Just a bit shaken up. Nothing some antiseptic and a bandage won't fix. The paramedic glanced at his partner, then shrugged. At least let us clean and dress that cut properly. He reached for his medical kit. While they patched her up, Jack surveyed the wreckage. The sedan, what remained of it, was being loaded onto a tow truck. The flames had been extinguished, but the acrid smell of burnt rubber and melted upholstery still hung in the air. The rain had settled into a gentle drizzle, though lightning still flickered in the distance. All set? The paramedic announced, securing the last piece of tape over Lena's bandage. But please seek immediate medical attention if you experience any dizziness, nausea, or unusual headaches. Lena nodded, pulling the emergency blanket tighter. Thank you. Jack stepped forward. I can drive you to the Pine Grove Inn. It's just a few blocks from here. That's very kind, but I already tried calling them. Lena's shoulders slumped slightly. They're completely booked, something about a regional quilting convention. The next closest hotel is 40 minutes away in Millbrook, Jack said, running a hand through his wet hair. He hesitated, then added, I have a rental apartment above my garage. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean and warm. Lena looked up at him, studying his face. I couldn't impose. It's no imposition. You can't very well sleep in your car. He gestured toward the wreck being hauled away. Besides, I'm going to need to give you an estimate on the repairs tomorrow anyway. After a moment's consideration, Lena nodded. Just for a couple of nights, until I can make other arrangements. The drive back to the garage was quiet, except for the squeak of windshield wipers and the occasional rumble of thunder. Jack's old pickup truck smelled of motor oil and pine air freshener. As they pulled into the lot, warm light spilled from the kitchen windows of the attached house. Maya must be home, Jack said, parking under the covered area. That's my daughter, she's 12. They hurried through the rain to the side door. The kitchen was warm and bright, and the scent of hot chocolate filled the air. Maya stood at the counter, her dark curly hair pulled back in a ponytail, stirring something in a pot. She looked up as they entered, her eyes widening at the sight of their bedraggled appearance. Dad, what happened? There was an accident on the bridge, Jack explained, helping Lena with her ruined jacket. This is Miss White. She's going to stay in the apartment for a few days while we fix her car. Maya's expression shifted from concern to interest. I just made hot chocolate. Would you like some? It always makes me feel better when I'm scared or cold. A genuine smile crossed Lena's tired face. That's very thoughtful of you, Maya. I'd love some. While Maya poured the hot chocolate into mugs, Jack retrieved some towels from the hall closet. The apartment stairs are through that door, he said, pointing. I'll grab your luggage. He returned moments later, with 2 waterlogged designer suitcases, setting them carefully in the corner. Water had seeped into the expensive leather, and one of the handles was crushed from the impact. Lena barely glanced at them, focused instead on warming her hands around the mug Maya had given her. This is delicious, she said after taking a sip. Is that a hint of cinnamon I taste? Maya beamed. Mom's secret recipe. She always said hot chocolate needs a little something extra to make it special. Jack's expression flickered for just a moment at the mention of his late wife, but he recovered quickly. Let me show you up to the apartment. Maya, homework finished? Almost, just one more math problem. Jack led Lena through the door and up a narrow staircase to a small but well-maintained apartment. The main room combined a living area and kitchenette, with a bedroom and bathroom off to the side. Simple furnishings filled the space: a comfortable-looking couch, a coffee table, a small dining set near the window. The kitchen's stocked with basics, Jack explained, flipping on lights as they went. Bathroom's got fresh towels. Heat controls are by the door if you get cold. This is lovely, Lena said, taking in the space. Thank you. I really mean it, for everything tonight. Not everyone would have. She trailed off, moving to the window that overlooked the quiet street. The storm continued its slow march across Willow Ridge, rain tapping against the glass. Lightning illuminated Lena's face for a brief moment, highlighting the elegant lines of her profile and the distant look in her eyes as she gazed out into the darkness. Jack headed back downstairs to check on Maya, finding her at the kitchen table with her math book. She looked up as he entered. She looks lonely, Maya whispered, glancing toward the ceiling. Morning light filtered through the lingering storm clouds, casting a pearl-gray glow over Willow Ridge. In Jack's garage, the rhythmic sound of tools against metal echoed as he worked on a set of worn brake pads. The familiar scent of motor oil and coffee mingled in the air, while upstairs, the muffled sounds of conversation and clinking spoons drifted down from his kitchen. Maya sat at the kitchen table with their unexpected guest, both of them hunched over bowls of Cheerios. Lena had borrowed one of Jack's old flannel shirts, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked different from the elegant woman they'd pulled from the wreck last night. More approachable, somehow. Do you like music? Maya asked between bites, swinging her legs under the table. Dad says I'm getting pretty good at the violin. Well, when the school's loaner instrument isn't squeaking. I used to play piano, Lena replied, stirring her cereal thoughtfully. Though these days I mostly listen. Classical? Mostly, but I'm learning this really cool fiddle piece too. The stairs creaked as Lena made her way down to the garage a little later, carrying a steaming mug of coffee. I thought you might need this, she said, placing it on Jack's workbench. And I wanted to thank you again for everything. Jack wiped his hands on a rag and accepted the coffee with a nod. Anyone would have done the same. Not everyone, Lena said quietly. She reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. Please, let me pay for the repairs in advance. It's the least I can do. We'll figure all that out later, Jack said firmly, setting the mug down. Right now, focus on getting your bearings. Town's small, but friendly enough. Church is just down Main Street if you're looking for something to do. Lena hesitated, then tucked the checkbook away. Thank you. I think I will take a walk, actually. The morning air was crisp as Lena made her way down Main Street, past the hardware store and Sarah's diner. The Methodist church stood at the corner, its white steeple reaching into the cloudy sky. A hand-painted sign by the side door read, Food Pantry Open, Volunteers Welcome. Inside, she found Pastor Ruth Ellison, directing a small group of volunteers as they sorted donations. The pastor's silver hair was tied back in a neat bun, her warm brown eyes crinkling at the corners as she spotted Lena hovering in the doorway. Well, here's a new face, Pastor Ruth said, walking over. I'm Ruth Ellison. Lena White, she replied, shaking the offered hand. I saw the sign about volunteers. Perfect timing. These boxes won't stack themselves. Ruth handed her a box of canned goods. Many hands make light work, as my grandmother used to say. For the next few hours, Lena worked alongside the other volunteers, sorting donations and helping elderly visitors carry their groceries to their cars. She had a gentle way about her, listening patiently to Mrs. Henderson's stories about her grandchildren and helping Mr. Rodriguez find the low-sodium options he needed for his diet. From his garage across the street, Jack couldn't help but notice. He watched through the open doors as Lena guided an elderly woman with a walker to her car, holding an umbrella over both of them when the drizzle returned. The afternoon light was softening when Lena returned to the garage, carrying a long black case. Maya was doing homework at the counter, her feet swinging on the tall stool. "Maya," Lena called, setting the case down carefully. "I have something for you, well, for the school music program, really." Maya hopped down from her stool as Lena opened the case, revealing a beautiful violin, its wood gleaming with a rich amber glow. "It's a Karl Hofner," Lena explained, while Maya stared wide-eyed. "I saw it in the window of that antique shop down the street. The owner said it's been sitting there for months, waiting for the right home." "It's beautiful," Maya whispered, reaching out to touch the smooth wood reverently. Jack stepped closer, studying the instrument. "This is too much," he started to say, but Lena held up a hand. "It's for the school," she insisted. "All students should have access to quality instruments. Besides," she added with a small smile, "I'd love to hear you play sometime." That evening, the three of them gathered around Jack's kitchen table, sharing a simple dinner of spaghetti and garlic bread. The old kitchen light cast a warm glow over their faces as Maya excitedly detailed her plans for the violin. "Miss Patterson is going to flip when she sees it." Maya twirled pasta around her fork. "She's been trying to get the school board to fund new instruments forever." Lena smiled, passing the garlic bread to Jack. "Maybe you can play something for us after dinner?" "Only if you'll try to remember some of your piano pieces," Maya bargained, grinning. Jack watched them, something in his chest loosening at the sound of laughter filling his kitchen. It had been a while since these walls had heard so much joy. Maya's eyes sparkled as she described the piece she was learning, and even Lena seemed more relaxed, the worried crease between her eyebrows smoothing out as she listened. Outside, the last of the storm clouds were finally breaking apart, revealing patches of early evening sky. Inside, the warm kitchen light spilled over empty plates and half-filled glasses, while the conversation flowed easily between them, softening the edges of the day. The morning sun had finally broken through the clouds, casting warm patches of light across Jack's garage floor. He was bent over the engine of Mrs. Peterson's ancient pickup truck when he heard the first curious visitor of the day. "Morning, Jack," Tom from the hardware store called out, jingling his keys. "Just wondering if you needed any supplies? Heard you had quite the excitement last night at the bridge." Jack straightened up, wiping his hands on a red shop rag. "We're good on supplies, Tom. Thanks for checking." Before Tom could probe further, Sarah from the diner poked her head in. "Brought you some coffee, Jack. Extra strong, just how you like it." She glanced around the garage, clearly hoping to catch sight of someone else. "Thanks, Sarah. You didn't have to do that." Jack accepted the coffee with a knowing look. In a town like Willow Ridge, news traveled faster than summer lightning. Throughout the morning, a steady stream of townspeople found reasons to stop by. Bill needed windshield washer fluid. Margaret's cat had supposedly run into the garage, though Jack hadn't seen any cat. Each visitor tried to casually bring up the crash, the mysterious woman, or both. Around noon, Rosa Delgado's blue Buick pulled up. Unlike the others, Rosa didn't pretend. She never did. At 70, she had earned the right to be direct. "Jack Mercer," she announced, climbing out of her car with the grace of someone half her age. "My car needs a tune-up, and I need the truth about your city lady guest." Jack couldn't help but smile. He had known Rosa since he was Maya's age, back when she worked in the school cafeteria. She had slipped him extra cookies when his mom was sick, and later, she'd been there for Maya after Claire passed. "The tune-up I can help with," he said, gesturing to an empty bay. "As for my guest, there's not much to tell. Car accident, needed a place to stay. She'll be gone in a few days." Rosa settled into the worn waiting room chair, arranging her bright floral skirt. "Mm-hmm. And I'm winning the lottery next week." Her dark eyes twinkled. "A woman that well-dressed doesn't just appear in Willow Ridge by accident, mihijo." Jack focused on checking Rosa's oil level. "Sometimes things are exactly what they seem, Rosa." "And sometimes they're not," she countered, but her tone was gentle. "Just be careful, Jack. You and Maya have good hearts. Some people take advantage of that." While Jack worked on Rosa's car, the garage stayed mercifully quiet. The afternoon stretched on, peaceful and productive, until the familiar sound of footsteps on gravel made him look up. Lena was walking back from town, carrying 2 paper grocery bags. She had changed into simple jeans and a blue sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Something about her looked more relaxed than yesterday, as if the town's quiet streets had worked some magic. "I thought I'd make dinner," she said, setting the bags on his workbench, "to thank you for everything. Do you and Maya like beef stew?" Jack wiped his hands clean. "You don't have to cook for us." "I want to," she insisted. "Besides, I saw your kitchen. Someone needs to rescue those pots from neglect." Later that evening, the kitchen filled with the rich aroma of simmering stew. Maya set the table while Lena stirred the pot, adding pinches of herbs Jack didn't even know he owned. The domesticity of it all made his chest tight with unexpected emotion. Over bowls of steaming stew, Maya chatted about school and violin practice. Jack noticed how Lena listened intently, asking questions that showed genuine interest. She had a way of making people feel heard. "This is amazing," Jack said, soaking up gravy with a piece of bread. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" Lena's smile turned wistful. "Our housekeeper, Carmen. She taught me when I was young. Said everyone should know how to feed their soul, not just their stomach." She paused, something flickering behind her eyes. "I left a complicated situation behind. Cooking helps me feel grounded." Jack nodded, not pushing. Everyone in this kitchen knew about leaving things behind, about starting over. They finished dinner sharing lighter stories. Maya's first violin recital, Jack's misadventures learning to change a tire, Lena's college days studying art history. After Maya went upstairs to finish homework, Jack and Lena fell into an easy rhythm washing dishes. The TV in the living room played quietly, its blue light casting shadows on the wall. A news anchor's voice drifted in, barely audible over running water and clinking plates. Jack glanced up at the screen, hands stilling on a soapy pot. A blurred image showed a woman at an airport, dark hair, elegant coat. The caption read, "Elena Whitford, heiress to Whitford Holdings, whereabouts unknown." He turned toward Lena, who was carefully drying a bowl, her profile outlined against the kitchen window. The resemblance was there, in the curve of her jaw, the straight line of her nose. His suspicion crystallized, but he kept his voice steady, focusing on rinsing the last pot. The afternoon light faded as rain clouds returned, casting a gray filter over Willow Ridge. Jack sat in his cramped office, the small TV mounted in the corner, playing the afternoon news on mute. He could hear the soft footsteps of Lena moving around upstairs in the apartment, probably doing the laundry she'd insisted on handling despite his protests. His attention drifted from the paperwork spread across his desk to the TV screen as a familiar corporate logo flashed Whitford Holdings. The ticker at the bottom scrolled, with updates about discrimination allegations at their regional plants. Jack reached for the remote and turned up the volume just enough to hear. "The investigation into Whitford Holdings' hiring practices continues," the reporter announced. "Sources say Elena Whitford, daughter of CEO Daniel Whitford, hasn't been seen at the company headquarters for weeks amid growing tensions." The image changed to a photograph that made Jack's hand freeze mid-reach for his coffee cup. There, in crisp detail, was Elena Whitford, stepping out of a sleek corporate building. Her hair was styled differently, and she wore an expensive business suit instead of the casual clothes she'd been wearing around town, but it was unmistakably her. Jack leaned back in his chair, the springs creaking softly. The pieces started falling into place. Her reluctance to give her full name, the high-end luggage, the way she'd flinched when he'd mentioned the local Whitford plant while driving her into town. Above, the washing machine clicked off. Jack waited, listening to the sounds of Lena Elena moving around, probably transferring clothes to the dryer. His mind raced through every interaction they'd had over the past few days. Nothing about her kindness had seemed fake. The way she'd helped at the food pantry, her genuine interest in Maya's violin playing, the comfortable conversations over dinner, it all felt real. The rain picked up, drumming steadily against the garage's metal roof. Jack waited until after dinner, after Maya had started her homework upstairs. Elena was washing dishes, her sleeves rolled up, looking nothing like the corporate heiress from the news. "The water pressure's not great up there," she said without turning around, "but at least the hot water holds out." "Elena." Jack said it quietly, but she stilled immediately, her hands stopping mid-scrub in the soapy water. "Or should I still call you Lena?" She didn't turn around right away. Her shoulders tensed, then dropped with a deep breath. When she finally faced him, her eyes were tired, but steady. "You saw the news?" "Yeah." Jack leaned against the doorframe, keeping his voice gentle. "Want to tell me what's really going on?" Elena dried her hands slowly on a dish towel, buying time. "I should have told you sooner. You saved my life. You deserve the truth." She gestured to the kitchen table. "Can we sit?" Jack pulled out a chair, watching as she gathered her thoughts. The rain continued its steady rhythm outside. "Everything you've probably heard about Whitford Holdings is true," she began, her fingers tracing the wood grain of the table. "The discrimination, the targeted layoffs, all of it. But it goes deeper than the public knows. There's a group of executives, led by our VP of Operations, who've been systematically targeting minority employees for years. And you're trying to stop it?" She nodded, meeting his eyes. "I've been gathering evidence, emails, meeting recordings, internal memos, but they know I'm onto them. There was a break-in at my apartment in the city. Then, my car's brakes started acting strange." She gave a hollow laugh. "The crash on the bridge probably wasn't an accident." Jack felt his protective instincts kick in. "Have you gone to the police?" "I need concrete proof first. These people have friends in high places. And my father." She trailed off, pain flickering across her face. "He's not a bad man, but he's been blind to what's happening in his own company. He thinks I'm being dramatic, trying to make waves." "So you ran." "I needed somewhere quiet to organize the evidence, somewhere they wouldn't think to look." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I never meant to involve anyone else." "I definitely never meant to involve your family." Jack studied her face, seeing not the wealthy heiress from TV, but the woman who'd spent hours helping Pastor Ruth sort donations, who'd made his daughter laugh for the first time in months. "The money my family has," Elena continued, her voice thick with emotion. "It came from people's hard work. And those same people were betrayed, discriminated against, pushed out. I can't live with that. I have to make it right." A floorboard creaked overhead, making them both look up. Maya stood at the top of the stairs, her eyes wide, clutching her math textbook. "You're Elena Whitford?" Maya's voice wavered. "From the news?" Elena's face paled. "Maya. The one they say closed the mill?" Maya took a step down, then stopped. "Tommy's dad lost his job there. He said the Whitfords were bad people." "Maya." Jack started to rise. But Elena held up a hand. "Your friend's dad is right to be angry," Elena said softly. "What happened to him was wrong. That's why I'm here to try to fix it, to make sure it never happens again." Maya descended a few more steps, her expression uncertain. "Is that why you bought the violin for school? Because you feel guilty?" "No," Elena replied immediately. "I did that because you told me about loving music, about wanting to play in the school orchestra. It had nothing to do with guilt. Just like helping at the food pantry had nothing to do with guilt. Those things were about being part of this community, even if only for a little while." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady patter of rain. Maya clutched her textbook tighter, looking between her father and Elena. Are we in danger? She finally asked. Because we helped you. Jack stood up, crossing to the stairs. No one's going to hurt us, sweetheart. Elena's trying to do the right thing, and sometimes that means keeping secrets for a while. Maya chewed her lip, processing. Like when you didn't tell Grandma about her surprise birthday party? A surprised laugh escaped Elena. Something like that. Just bigger. Can you really fix what happened? Make it better? Elena's expression turned serious. I'm going to try my hardest. That's a promise. Maya nodded slowly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Okay. But no more secrets? No more secrets, Elena agreed softly. The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows of Mel's diner, warming the worn red vinyl booths where the breakfast crowd gathered. The familiar scent of coffee and maple syrup filled the air as Jack, Maya, and Lena slid into their usual corner spot. Maya immediately grabbed the syrup dispenser, creating an elaborate pattern on her stack of pancakes. Careful there, honey, Jack said with a gentle smile. Leave some for the rest of Willow Ridge. Lena sipped her coffee, her shoulders relaxed for the first time since Jack had confronted her about her identity. She'd spent the night explaining everything the corruption she'd uncovered, her need to gather evidence safely away from prying eyes. Jack had listened, and though caution still flickered in his eyes, he'd chosen to trust her. The bell above the diner's door chimed as members of the town council filed in, led by Harlan Pike. His polished appearance and practiced smile seemed out of place among the regular morning crowd of mechanics and factory workers. He nodded at familiar faces, working the room like the politician he was. Something's up, Jack muttered, noticing how Harlan positioned himself near the counter where everyone could see him. He only shows up here when he's got an announcement to make. Maya paused mid-bite. Is it about the school music program? They still haven't replaced Mrs. Henderson's piano. I doubt it, sweetheart, Jack replied, his eyes following Harlan's movements. Lena shifted in her seat, trying to keep her face turned away from the gathering crowd. She'd tied her hair back simply and worn her plainest sweater, but anxiety crept into her posture. Harlan cleared his throat, tapping a spoon against his coffee mug. The diner's chatter died down as faces turned toward him. Friends and neighbors, he began, his voice carrying that practiced warmth politicians, perfect over years of public speaking. I have some exciting news that couldn't wait for a formal announcement. Jack felt Lena's knee brush against his under the table as she tensed. After months of negotiations, I'm pleased to share that White Tech Manufacturing, a subsidiary of Whitford Holdings, has expressed serious interest in reopening our mill. Harlan paused, letting the words sink in. This could mean hundreds of jobs returning to Willow Ridge. A murmur rippled through the diner. Jack watched emotions play across different faces, hope in some, skepticism in others. Rosa Delgado, who ran the flower shop down the street, crossed her arms and frowned. Now, I know some of you have concerns about Whitford's recent publicity. Harlan continued, his eyes scanning the crowd. But this is about local jobs, about breathing life back into our community. The past is the past. What about the discrimination lawsuits? Someone called out from near the kitchen. Harlan's smile didn't waver. All being handled at the corporate level, I'm assured. White Tech has an entirely new management team. Maya looked up at Lena, who was staring intently at her coffee cup, her knuckles white around the handle. The diner's atmosphere shifted as people began talking among themselves. Jack caught fragments of conversation, excited whispers about job possibilities mixed with worried discussions about Whitford's reputation. Then he heard it. A woman's voice from 2 booths over. You know, I heard someone say they saw a Whitford woman in town just yesterday. Fancy car, expensive clothes. Jack's jaw tightened as he watched Harlan's reaction. The councilman's eyes gleamed with something that made Jack's instincts bristle not surprise, but satisfaction. As if he'd been waiting for exactly this kind of rumor. Well now, that would be interesting, Harlan said loudly enough to catch everyone's attention again. Having a Whitford family member right here in Willow Ridge during such an important time. Though I'm sure if someone from such a prominent family were visiting, they'd want to be transparent with our community. Wouldn't you agree? The question hung in the air like smoke. Jack felt Lena's slight flinch beside him. "Daddy," Maya whispered. "Can we go? I'm full." Jack nodded, reaching for his wallet. He laid down enough cash to cover their breakfast and then some, catching Mel's eye behind the counter with a silent thank you. They made their way to the door, Lena keeping her head down without being obvious about it. Jack positioned himself between her and Harlan's line of sight as they passed. Outside, the morning had warmed considerably, but Lena shivered slightly as they walked the short distance back to the garage. Jack could see people already gathering outside the diner, forming small clusters of animated discussion. "The mill's been closed 3 years now," Jack explained quietly to Lena as they walked. "Lot of families had to leave town when it shut down. Some folks are desperate enough to overlook anything for the chance at steady work again." "And some aren't?" Lena added, watching Rosa Delgado gesture emphatically to her friends outside the diner, clearly upset about the announcement. They reached the garage just as the crowd outside the diner grew larger. The volume of voices rose, carrying across the street words like jobs and trust and Whitford, floating on the morning air. Jack stood in the doorway of his garage, watching the growing debate. Maya slipped her hand into his, while Lena hung back in the shadows of the building's interior. The morning sun caught the diner's windows, reflecting the image of townspeople, divided, some nodding enthusiastically as Harlan continued to speak, others shaking their heads and turning away. The afternoon sun beat down on Jack's shoulders as he leaned under the hood of an old Dodge van. His t-shirt was already spotted with sweat and grease, but he didn't mind. This was Frank Miller's Vanna Vietnam vet who'd given more than most to his country. The transmission needed work, and Jack was determined to get it running smoothly again. "Hand me that socket wrench, would you?" Jack called out to no one in particular, then remembered Maya was at school and Lena was out with Pastor Ruth. He smiled to himself, surprised at how quickly he'd gotten used to having help around the garage. The radio played softly in the background as Jack worked, its familiar country tunes mixing with the metallic clinks of tools against engine parts. Every now and then, he'd pause to wipe his brow with the back of his arm, leaving streaks of grease across his forehead. Around 3 o'clock, Lena's familiar figure appeared in the garage doorway, carrying paper bags from the local grocery store. Her hair was slightly windblown from spending the afternoon in Pastor Ruth's old station wagon, delivering food to homebound residents. "How's Frank's van coming along?" she asked, setting the bags down on a clean workbench. "Getting there," Jack replied, straightening up. "The transmission's seen better days, but we'll have her running right soon enough." Lena nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I was talking with Pastor Ruth about Frank. She mentioned he's been having trouble with medical bills since his last surgery." Jack's face grew serious. "Yeah, the VA's been giving him the runaround. Good man like Frank shouldn't have to worry about that stuff." Later that afternoon, while Jack was finishing up with the van, Maya burst through the garage door, her backpack bouncing against her back. "Dad! Ms. White! Look what I found in the storage closet." In her hands was a worn wooden box with delicate carved flowers on the lid. Jack's breath caught for a moment. "Your mom's music box," he said softly. "I'd forgotten about that." Maya set it carefully on the workbench. "It doesn't play anymore, though." She tried to wind the key, but it wouldn't turn. "May I?" Lena asked gently, stepping closer. Maya handed her the box, and Lena examined it with careful fingers. "The mechanism's probably just stuck. We could try to fix it together if you'd like." Maya's face lit up. "Really? You know how to fix music boxes?" "I used to collect them," Lena admitted. "Learned a thing or two about their inner workings." For the next hour, Maya and Lena sat at the workbench, heads bent together over the music box. Jack watched them between customers, his heart warming at the sight. They worked with tiny screwdrivers and cleaning supplies, Lena patiently explaining each step to Maya. "Mom used to wind it up every night before bed," Maya said quietly, as they waited for a drop of oil to work its way into the mechanism. "She said it helped keep the bad dreams away." Lena's hands stilled on the box. "You must miss her very much." Maya nodded, her fingers tracing the carved flowers. Sometimes I forget what her voice sounded like. Is that bad? No, sweetheart. Lena answered, her voice gentle. Our memories change shape sometimes, but the love stays the same. She gave Maya's shoulder a squeeze. Want to tell me about her? As Jack worked on the van, he could hear Maya's voice rising and falling, sharing stories about her mother, how she always sang in the kitchen, how she taught Maya to braid hair, how she loved thunderstorms. Lena listened intently, asking questions at just the right moments, her hands steady on the music box. Finally, with a soft click, the mechanism freed up. Maya turned the key, and a tinkling melody filled the garage. Her eyes went wide with delight. Beautiful dreamer, Jack said from across the garage. Your mom's favorite. That evening they sat around the kitchen table, sharing a meal of chicken pot pie that Lena had picked up from the diner. Maya was telling them about her day at school, acting out how her friend Jessica had accidentally set off the fire alarm during science class. And then Mr. Peterson comes running in with the fire extinguisher, Maya gasped through her laughter. But it was just Tyler's failed chemistry experiment smoking. Jack couldn't help but chuckle, watching his daughter's animated storytelling. Lena's laughter joined theirs, bright and genuine. For a moment, the kitchen felt warmer than it had in years. After dinner, while Maya was upstairs doing homework, Jack and Lena stood on the back porch. The evening air was cool, and moths danced around the yellow porch light. From somewhere in the distance came the sound of a train whistle, lonely and familiar. I wanted to thank you, Jack said, breaking the comfortable silence. For today, for helping with the music box, and for listening to Maya. She doesn't talk about her mom much anymore. She's a remarkable girl, Lena replied, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. You've done an amazing job with her, Jack. And thank you for what you did for Frank, he added quietly. Pastor Ruth told me about the medical bills being mysteriously paid off. Lena looked down at her mug, a faint smile playing at her lips. It's the least I can do. The morning dawned gray and heavy over Willow Ridge. Jack stood in his kitchen, coffee cup warming his hands as he stared at the newspaper on the counter. The bold headline seemed to shout at him, Whitford Eyes Mill reopening. Below it was a photo of the old brick building, its broken windows, like dark, hollow eyes. Maya peered around his arm, her cereal spoon dripping milk. Is that bad news, Dad? Not sure yet, sweetheart. Jack folded the paper and tucked it under his arm. Finish your breakfast. You'll be late for school. Outside, the town was already stirring with unusual energy. As Jack walked Maya to the bus stop, he noticed fresh papers taped to shop windows. Some showed bright green lettering. Jobs now, support the mill. Others in angry red, remember who left us behind. The hardware store owner, Tom, was putting up both kinds side by side. Keeping it fair? He said with a shrug when he caught Jack looking, though folks ain't feeling very fair-minded lately. After seeing Maya off, Jack headed to the garage. He found Harlan Pike leaning against the office door, his politician's smile firmly in place. The councilman's casual pose didn't match the calculation in his eyes. Morning, Jack, Harlan said, straightening his tie. Quite the buzz around town today. So I see. Jack unlocked the door, not inviting Harlan inside. Speaking of seeing things, Harlan's voice took on an edge. Been noticing you're housing strangers these days. In these uncertain times, we all need to be careful about who we let into our community. Jack met Harlan's gaze steadily. My rental apartment, my business. Everyone's business in a small town, Jack. You know that. Harlan adjusted his cuffs. Especially with Whitford sniffing around again. Funny timing, wouldn't you say? Before Jack could respond, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Lena appeared, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater. She froze briefly at the sight of Harlan, then continued down with deliberate calm. Good morning, she said politely, nodding to both men. Harlan's smile widened, but his eyes narrowed. Indeed it is. Hope you're enjoying our little town, miss? White, she supplied smoothly. And yes, everyone's been very kind. How fortunate. Harlan checked his watch. Well, duty calls. Jack, Remember what I said about being careful." He strolled away, whistling. Once he was gone, Lena's shoulders slumped. "I should leave. I'm bringing trouble to your door." Jack shook his head. "Your car's not ready, and you need somewhere safe while you finish your work." He hesitated, then added, "Unless you're worried about your safety here?" "No, it's not that." She wrapped her arms around herself. "But the town's splitting in half, and it's my family's fault. Again." "The town's been split since the mill closed," Jack said firmly. "You didn't cause that." Throughout the day, tension hummed through Willow Ridge like a live wire. Jack heard snippets of heated conversations through his open garage door. The promise of jobs warred with memories of betrayal. By evening, he needed a break and headed to Sarah's diner for dinner. The bell chimed as he entered, but few looked up. The usual friendly chatter was replaced by intense discussions in low voices. Jack slid onto a stool at the counter, ordering his usual burger. He was halfway through his meal when voices rose from a corner booth. "My cousin lost everything when they shut down," someone shouted. "Now they want to walk back in like nothing happened?" "And what's your brilliant plan for keeping this town alive?" another shot back. "We need those jobs." "They'll just shut it down again the minute it suits them." Jack turned to see two men standing now, faces red. Others were taking sides, the volume rising. Sarah behind the counter looked worried. "Hey!" Jack's voice cut through the noise. He stood slowly, hands raised. "How about we all take a breath?" "Easy for you to say, Mercer," one man spat. "Your garage is doing fine." "Yeah, and I remember working on plenty of your cars when you couldn't afford repairs after the layoffs," Jack said calmly. "We all hurt when the mill closed. But shouting won't fix anything." "Then what will?" someone called out. "Thinking it through carefully," Jack replied. "Making sure any deal actually protects the town this time, but we can't do that if we're at each other's throats." The tension slowly deflated, though angry mutters continued. People returned to their meals, but the atmosphere remained brittle. Jack left money on the counter and headed out, the weight of the day heavy on his shoulders. Up in the apartment above the garage, Lena lay in bed, listening to rain tap against the window. The sound usually soothed her, but tonight it felt like accusation. Each drop seemed to whisper, "Your fault. Your family. Your presence." She could hear the town's pain in every argument, see it in every wary glance. Her evidence against the corrupt executives might help prevent future discrimination, but it couldn't heal these old wounds. Rolling onto her side, she watched water trickle down the glass, knowing sleep would be long in coming. The rain kept falling, and somewhere in the darkness, Willow Ridge's division grew deeper with each passing hour. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows, a welcome change after days of relentless rain. Steam rose from Jack's coffee mug as he watched Lena across the table, her pen moving steadily across a notepad. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she wrote, pausing occasionally to tap the pen against her chin. "What's on your mind?" Jack asked, taking another sip of coffee. Lena looked up, a spark of determination in her eyes. "I've been thinking about how to help the town see past. Well, past my name." She turned the notepad around, showing him a carefully bulleted list. "What if we organized a community repair day here at the garage? Free basic repairs for seniors and veterans." Jack leaned forward, scanning the neat handwriting. "Free repairs?" "I'd cover all the parts costs, of course," Lena added quickly. "But it's not about the money. It's about showing people who we really are. Who you are. This garage isn't just a business. It's a place where people can find help when they need it." Maya appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, drawn by their conversation. "Like when Mrs. Rodriguez's car wouldn't start, and Dad fixed it even though she could only pay a little at a time?" Jack's ears reddened slightly. "That's just being neighborly." "Exactly," Lena said, smiling at Maya. "Being neighborly. That's what we need more of right now." She flipped to a fresh page in her notepad. "We could start with basic services, oil changes, brake checks, minor repairs, things that make a real difference in people's lives." Jack rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Could work. Rosa's arthritis has been acting up. She's been putting off getting her truck looked at. And there's old Mr. Chen from the hardware store. I can help. Maya bounced on her toes. I could make signs and help organize things. And maybe we could have lemonade and cookies? Lena's face lit up. That's perfect, Maya. We want it to feel welcoming, like a community gathering, not just a repair shop. They spent the next hour planning, the notepad filling with ideas. Jack contributed his knowledge of the town's needs, while Maya suggested adding music to make it festive. Lena's corporate experience showed in how she organized the logistics, breaking down tasks into manageable pieces. By mid-morning, they were ready to put their plan into action. Maya sat cross-legged on the garage floor, surrounded by poster board and markers, carefully painting their first sign. Her tongue stuck out slightly, as she concentrated on making each letter perfect. Jack and Lena walked downtown, stopping in shops to spread the word. At the church, Pastor Ruth's eyes crinkled with approval. This is exactly what we need, she said, promising to announce it at Sunday's service. At the diner, they left flyers on the counter, where Rosa immediately picked one up, her face softening as she read it. Back at the garage, Jack sorted through his tools while Lena created a schedule on his old whiteboard. She'd organized the day into time slots, ensuring they could help as many people as possible without getting overwhelmed. We should have a priority system, Jack suggested, wiping grease from a wrench. Some folks might need more urgent repairs. Lena nodded, adding another column to her chart. And we should have a way for people to sign up ahead of time. That way, no one has to wait too long. Maya emerged from behind her father's desk with a stack of freshly printed flyers. Look what I made! The papers featured a simple but cheerful design, a wrench and heart intertwined with Community Repair Day in bold letters. These are wonderful, Maya, Lena said, examining one. You have quite an artistic touch. The afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. Jack checked his inventory of parts, making notes of what they'd need to order. Lena made phone calls to local suppliers, arranging for additional materials at wholesale prices. Maya disappeared into the storage room and emerged with strings of old Christmas lights she insisted would make everything more festive. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the garage floor, they gathered outside to hang Maya's masterpiece, a large banner that read, Repair Day, All Welcome, in bright, hopeful colors. Jack secured the last corner, while Lena held the ladder steady. There, Maya said proudly, stepping back to admire their work. Now everyone will know they're welcome here. The sign swayed gently in the evening breeze, its message clear against the brick wall of the garage. Jack's eyes met Lena's, and they shared a quiet moment of understanding. This wasn't just about fixing cars, it was about fixing something much bigger, one small act of kindness at a time. The last rays of sunlight caught the edges of the sign, making the paint shimmer. Maya's careful lettering stood out boldly against the white background, a beacon of hope in the gathering dusk. The garage, that had always been Jack's sanctuary, was transforming into something more. A meeting place, a helping hand, a bridge between divided hearts. The first rays of Saturday morning painted the sky in soft pinks and oranges as Jack unlocked the garage doors. The air hummed with anticipation as a line of cars already stretched down the street. Pastor Ruth's station wagon pulled up, loaded with boxes of fresh-baked muffins and thermoses of hot coffee. Looks like the whole town showed up, Pastor Ruth said, balancing a tray of blueberry muffins. Her gray hair caught the early light as she arranged the treats on a folding table near the garage entrance. Maya darted between the waiting vehicles, clipboard in hand, taking down names and repair needs. Her ponytail bounced with each step, and her smile grew wider as she recognized familiar faces. Mr. Peterson's truck needs an oil change, she called out to Jack. And Mrs. Cooper's brake light is out. Inside the garage, Jack and two volunteer mechanics from neighboring towns rolled out tool carts and lined up equipment. The radio played soft country music, mixing with the growing chatter outside. Lena moved among the crowd, wearing jeans and a simple blue shirt, greeting people with genuine warmth. Rosa Delgado's weathered pickup truck chugged into the lot, its faded red paint telling stories of decades of faithful service. She climbed down slowly, patting the hood with affection. "This was Miguel's pride and joy," she said as Lena approached. "He bought it new in '82, worked 3 jobs to pay it off." Lena listened intently as Rosa shared memories of her late husband, how he'd driven the children to school in that truck, hauled countless loads of groceries for elderly neighbors, and taught each of their kids to drive in it. "The engine's been making a funny noise," Rosa admitted, "but I can't bear to part with it." Jack wiped his hands on a rag and walked over. "Let's take a look, Rosa." He popped the hood, and his experienced eyes scanned the engine. "Timing belt's about done, and you could use new spark plugs. We'll get her running smooth again." The morning progressed steadily. The aroma of coffee and pastries mingled with motor oil and rubber. Pastor Ruth moved through the crowd, offering not just muffins, but kind words and gentle laughs. She paused beside an elderly veteran, examining his restored scooter, laying a weathered hand on his shoulder. Maya had set up a small violin practice in the corner of the garage, providing musical interludes between repair jobs. The sweet notes of "Amazing Grace" floated above the mechanical sounds, drawing smiles from the waiting customers. Lena found herself drawn into conversation after conversation. She met a retired schoolteacher whose ancient Volvo had taught 3 generations to drive. A young mother struggling with a temperamental minivan shared stories of her children's artwork decorating the back seat. Each tale wove another thread into the fabric of Willow Ridge's community. By midday, the garage buzzed with activity. Jack's shirt was stained with grease as he moved from vehicle to vehicle, his movements sure and practiced. The volunteer mechanics matched his pace, and together they transformed frustrated sighs into relieved smiles. "Look at this," Pastor Ruth murmured to Lena, gesturing to the scene before them. People who'd been arguing about the mill days before now stood in clusters, sharing stories and laughs. Sometimes the best sermons aren't preached from pulpits. Rosa's truck roared to life with a healthy purr, bringing tears to her eyes. "Sounds just like when Miguel first brought her home," she whispered, squeezing Jack's arm. When he tried to waive off payment, she insisted on leaving a batch of her famous tamales instead. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as the last vehicles pulled away. Tools were cleaned and stored, chairs folded, and empty muffin trays stacked. The garage gradually quieted, though the warmth of the day lingered in the air. Inside Jack's house, the 3 of them sank into the living room couch, physically drained but spirit soaring. Maya curled up between them, her violin case propped nearby. Jack's boots left dusty marks on the coffee table, but for once, he was too tired to care. 32 vehicles, Maya announced proudly, consulting her clipboard. And everyone smiled when they left. Lena leaned back, her eyes bright despite her exhaustion. That's what matters most. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the evening birds through the open window. The day's success settled around them like a warm blanket, and for that moment they were simply 3 people who had done something good together. The high school gym buzzed with nervous energy as people filed in, filling the metal folding chairs that faced the makeshift stage. Old basketball championship banners hung overhead, while fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow across worried faces. Jack helped Maya find a seat near the middle, noticing how the crowd had split itself, mill workers and their families on one side, those opposed to Whitford on the other. Lena stood at the back, dressed simply in a navy blazer and slacks. Her fingers twisted the small note card she held. When their eyes met across the room, Jack gave her an encouraging nod. Mayor Thompson stepped up to the podium first, his round face shiny with sweat. "Folks, we're here tonight to discuss the proposed reopening of the Willow Ridge Mill by Whitford subsidiaries. Now, before we open the floor for comments, we have a special guest who'd like to share some thoughts, Ms. Lena White, who's been staying in town these past weeks." A murmur rippled through the crowd as Lena made her way to the front. Jack watched her square her shoulders, straightening to her full height as she reached the podium. Maya squeezed his hand. "Good evening," Lena began, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "I've spent time getting to know many of you, fixing cars with Jack Mercer, stocking shelves with Pastor Ruth, hearing your stories over coffee at the diner. She paused, meeting different faces in the crowd. And I've learned that Willow Ridge isn't just looking for jobs, you're looking for justice. The room grew still. Even Councilman Pike, who'd been whispering to his supporters, fell silent. I understand the appeal of reopening the mill, but I also understand the fear that history might repeat itself. Lena's voice grew stronger. You deserve better than promises that might be broken. You deserve guarantees. She placed her notes down, gripping the podium's edges. That's why I'm here to make an offer, not from any corporation, but as someone who believes in this community. If Willow Ridge commits to demanding transparent, ethical contracts from any employer, including clear anti-discrimination policies and fair hiring practices, I will establish a $2 million community trust. Gasps and whispers erupted. Mayor Thompson's eyebrows shot up. This trust, Lena continued over the noise, will specifically support minority-owned businesses and job retraining programs. It will be managed by a local board, ensuring the money serves those who need it most. She looked directly at Rosa Delgado, who sat with her teenage sons. No more families turned away from opportunities. No more qualified workers passed over because of their last name or the color of their skin. Jack felt his chest tighten with pride. This was the real Elena Whitford, not the heiress hiding from scandal, but a woman trying to right old wrongs. The choice is yours, Lena said softly. You can accept quick promises, or you can demand better. You can let old wounds divide you, or you can build something new together. She stepped back from the podium. Thank you. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Rosa stood up, clapping slowly. Pastor Ruth joined in, then Jack and Maya. The applause spread like a wave, growing louder until it filled the gym. Jack saw tears in some eyes, hope in others. People started rising, crossing the invisible line that had divided the room. Mrs. Chen from the pharmacy hugged Mr. Rodriguez from the old mill crew. Teenagers who'd been sullenly checking their phones now sat up straight, listening as their parents discussed possibilities. Mayor Thompson had to rap his gavel several times to restore order. Well, that's certainly given us something to think about. Now, let's open the floor for questions. The discussion lasted another hour. Some voiced skepticism, others enthusiasm. But the tone had shifted. Instead of anger, there was purpose. Instead of fear, determination. When the meeting finally ended, people lingered in small groups, talking animatedly. Jack watched Lena speaking with Rosa and Pastor Ruth, their heads bent together as they discussed trust management ideas. Maya tugged at his sleeve. Can we give Miss Lena a ride home? Of course, sweetheart. Jack caught Lena's eye and gestured toward the door. Outside, the spring evening was soft and cool. Their footsteps echoed across the empty parking lot as they walked to Jack's truck. Maya climbed into the back seat while Lena slipped into the passenger side, finally letting her composed facade crack into an exhausted smile. That was quite something, Jack said quietly as he started the engine. Lena leaned back against the headrest, closing her eyes. I just hope it helps. They drove through the quiet streets of Willow Ridge. Shop windows were dark, but porch lights glowed warm welcome. At a stop sign, Jack noticed the Save Our Mill signs seemed less angry now, more hopeful. From the back seat, Maya's whisper floated forward. She's changing things, Dad. The morning sun cast long shadows across the garage's weathered concrete floor. Jack stood beneath the lifted chassis of Mrs. Peterson's ancient Buick, checking the transmission fluid, while Maya sat at his work desk doing homework before school. The familiar scents of motor oil and coffee filled the air. The purr of a luxury engine caught Jack's attention. Through the open garage door, he watched a black Mercedes sedan glide to a stop, its polished surface gleaming like obsidian. The car seemed out of place among the dusty pickup trucks and well-worn sedans that usually filled his lot. A tall man in an expertly tailored gray suit emerged from the driver's seat. His silver hair and commanding presence marked him instantly as someone used to boardrooms, not repair shops. Jack didn't need an introduction to know who this was. Daniel Whitford's face had been in enough news articles about the discrimination scandal. "Lena?" Jack called softly toward the apartment stairs. "You might want to come down here." She appeared moments later, freezing mid-step when she saw her father. The family resemblance was clear in their matching straight posture and careful expressions. "Elena," Daniel said, his voice carrying the polish of private schools and corporate presentations, "we need to talk." Maya looked up from her homework, eyes wide with curiosity. Jack touched her shoulder gently. "Time to head to school, kiddo." "But Dad." "I'll walk you," he said firmly, gathering her backpack. To Lena, he added, "We'll be back in 15 minutes. You can use my office if you'd like some privacy." Lena nodded gratefully, though tension lined her face. As Jack and Maya left through the side door, he saw father and daughter move toward his small office, maintaining a careful distance between them. When Jack returned, he found them seated across from each other at his desk. The contrast between Daniel's expensive suit and Jack's cluttered workspace of repair manuals and parts invoices was almost comical. Their voices carried through the partially open door. "The board is splitting over this, Elena," Daniel was saying. "Harrison's faction is pushing back hard against the discrimination allegations. They're hiring investigators." "Let them," Lena replied. "I have proof." "Which is exactly why I'm here." Daniel leaned forward, his voice softening. "I support what you're trying to do. The corruption in our company needs to be exposed. But this guerrilla warfare approach, hiding in small towns, it's dangerous and unnecessary." "Unnecessary?" Lena's laugh held no humor. "The proper channels failed, Dad. HR buried the complaints. Legal stonewalled the victims. I tried working within the system for 3 years." Jack busied himself with the Buick's transmission, trying not to eavesdrop while staying close enough to intervene if needed. Through the office window, he noticed several townspeople gathering across the street, watching the scene unfold. "I'm offering you resources," Daniel continued. "Our PR team can manage the message. Legal can file the right motions. We'll make sure the evidence reaches the right people." "You mean sanitize it," Lena said. "Package it to protect the Whitford name while throwing Harrison under the bus. That's not justice, that's damage control. It's pragmatic, and it's safer than what you're doing now." Daniel's chair creaked as he shifted. "These people you're hiding among, they don't know you, Elena. They don't understand our world. The moment something goes wrong, they'll turn on you." Jack couldn't help but wince at that. He glanced outside again, noting how the crowd had grown. Word traveled fast in Willow Ridge. "These people," Lena said sharply, "have shown me more genuine kindness in 2 weeks than I've seen in years of board meetings. They deserve better than corporate manipulation." "And you think your $2 million trust fund offer isn't manipulation?" Daniel's tone remained measured, but carried an edge. "The town hall speech was reckless, Elena. You're painting a target on yourself." A long silence followed. Jack heard papers rustling, then Daniel spoke again, his voice quieter. "I'm trying to protect you. Harrison's people, they play dirty. Let me help you do this the right way." "The right way?" Lena's chair scraped back. "The right way would have been stopping the discrimination before it started. The right way would have been listening to the workers instead of the shareholders. I'm done with the Whitford version of right." More townspeople had gathered now, their murmurs carrying across the street. Some pointed at the Mercedes, others at the office window. Jack recognized Harlan Pike among them, his face fixed in a calculating frown. "At least think about it," Daniel said, standing. "You don't have to be alone in this fight." "I'm not alone," Lena replied softly. Daniel emerged from the office, his expression carefully neutral as he nodded to Jack. "Mr. Mercer, thank you for looking after my daughter." "She looks after herself just fine," Jack answered, matching Daniel's formal tone. A ghost of a smile touched Daniel's lips. He reached for the car door, then paused. "Elena," he called back, "whatever you decide, be careful. Some people have too much to lose to play fair." The Mercedes purred to life. As it pulled away, Jack watched the gathered townspeople begin to disperse, their faces troubled. He could already imagine the rumors that would spread, the Whitfords staging a family drama for sympathy, using their small town as a PR backdrop. Lena stood in the office doorway, her arms wrapped around herself. "Well," she said with forced lightness, "that went about as well as expected." Jack grabbed a clean shop rag and wiped his hands. "You okay?" "I don't know." She watched the last of the onlookers drift away. "He means well, in his way. But he still doesn't understand that some things matter more than the family name." The early morning chill crept through Jack's jacket as he pulled into the garage's parking lot. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, painting the sky in muted grays. He reached for his coffee thermos, ready to start another day of repairs, when something caught his eye. His hand froze mid-air. Harsh red letters screamed across the garage's white wall. "Traitor!" Jack's stomach dropped. The paint was still fresh, dripping down the concrete like bloody tears. He sat in his truck for a long moment, knuckles white around the steering wheel, before pulling out his phone to call the police. Officer Martinez arrived 20 minutes later, camera in hand, documenting the vandalism. "Any idea who might have done this?" she asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. "Could be anyone," Jack said quietly. "Town's pretty divided right now." By the time Maya arrived for her usual morning visit before school, Jack had draped tarps over the graffiti. But kids talk, and news travels fast in small towns. She came home that afternoon with red-rimmed eyes, saying some classmates had called her the traitor's daughter during lunch. Lena's face went pale when she saw the covered wall. "I'm so sorry, Jack. This is all my fault." "Don't," Jack said firmly. "This isn't on you." But worse was yet to come. By mid-afternoon, Jack's phone started buzzing with messages. Someone had posted a video online. Clips from the town hall meeting, skillfully edited to make it look like Lena was smirking during emotional testimonies about job losses. Her words about ethical business practices were cut and rearranged to sound condescending and manipulative. The video spread like wildfire through social media. Within hours, a small crowd gathered outside the garage holding signs, "No more lies," and "Jobs, not jokes." Pastor Ruth pushed through the protesters to reach the garage door. "Jack," she said, her usually calm voice strained, "the bank called. They've frozen the community trust fund pending identity verification. They're saying they need Elena Whitford to appear in person." Jack watched Lena absorb this news, saw her shoulders slump slightly before squaring again. She'd been working at his desk, organizing the evidence she'd gathered against the corrupt executives. Her laptop hummed quietly, external hard drive blinking beside it. "We'll figure it out," he said, but the words felt hollow even to him. The protesters dispersed as evening approached, leaving behind their signs and a heavy silence. Jack sent Maya to stay with Pastor Ruth for the night, just to be safe. He and Lena worked late, going over options, trying to salvage what they could of the community's trust. Around midnight, exhausted, they finally called it a night. Jack locked up carefully, checking every window twice. "Try to get some sleep," he told Lena. "Tomorrow's another day." But at 3 a.m., his phone rang, the garage's security system. Jack threw on clothes and raced down, heart pounding. The side door hung open, lock broken. Inside, papers littered the floor like fallen leaves. Lena's desk had been ransacked. The external hard drive was gone. Years of evidence, carefully gathered emails, recorded conversations, financial records, all vanished. Lena stood in the doorway, still in her pajamas and jacket, face ashen in the harsh fluorescent light. "Everything was on that drive," she whispered. "Everything I needed to prove what they did." The police came again, took photos, dusted for prints. But Jack knew in his gut this wasn't some random break-in. This was targeted, professional. Dawn broke gray and weeping, rain streaming down the windows of Jack's kitchen. He sat at the table, head buried in his hands, listening to the steady drumming of water on the roof. The coffee in front of him had gone cold, untouched. The weight of doubt pressed down on his shoulders. Had he been wrong to trust Lena, to involve his family in this mess? Maya's tears, The hostile faces of his neighbors, the violation of his business, it all swirled in his mind like the storm outside. The rain kept falling, nature's rhythm marking time as Jack sat motionless, caught between what he knew was right and the price of standing by it. The next morning, a gentle knock echoed through the garage's office. Jack looked up from his desk, where he'd been staring at unpaid bills, to find Pastor Ruth holding a warm pan of cinnamon rolls. The sweet, spicy scent filled the small space, fighting against the lingering smell of spray paint that even bleach hadn't fully erased. "Thought you could use some comfort food," Pastor Ruth said, setting the pan down. Her usual warm smile carried a touch of worry around the edges. "Where's Lena?" "Upstairs. She's barely come down since yesterday." Jack rubbed his tired eyes. "Can't blame her. Half the town's turned against us overnight." Pastor Ruth pulled up a chair, her sensible shoes scuffing against the concrete floor. "Go get her. These are best warm, and we need to talk." Jack nodded and headed up the narrow stairs to the apartment. He found Lena at the kitchen table, surrounded by newspaper clippings and printouts. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her elegant posture had given way to exhaustion. "Pastor Ruth's here," he said softly, "with cinnamon rolls." Lena looked up, attempting a weak smile. "I'm not sure pastries can fix this mess." "Maybe not, but Ruth's wisdom might help. Come on." Back in the office, Pastor Ruth had already cut 3 generous portions. She waited until they'd both taken a few bites before speaking. "You two look like you're about to surrender," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "That's exactly what they want." Lena set down her fork. "Pastor, they stole crucial evidence. Without those emails proving the VP's discrimination, it's just my word against theirs. And now—" She gestured helplessly at the freshly painted wall outside, where the offensive graffiti had been covered but still showed through faintly. "Now the town thinks I'm manipulating them," she finished quietly. "Some do." Pastor Ruth agreed, "but not everyone. And there's something you both need to hear." She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "Rosa, we're ready for you." 20 minutes later, Rosa Delgado's weathered pickup truck rattled into the parking lot. The elderly woman entered the office with the energy of someone half her age, though her face was serious. "About time someone connected these dots," Rosa said, settling into the last empty chair. She declined the offered cinnamon roll with a wave. "What I'm about to tell you, I've kept quiet for 30 years. But seeing history try to repeat itself?" She shook her head firmly. "No mas." Jack leaned forward. "What history?" "My brother Miguel's story." Rosa's voice grew tight. "He tried to buy a house here in '92. Good job at the mill, perfect credit, everything in order. But Harlan Pike owned the real estate company back then." She paused, her hands clenching. "Miguel was married to a white woman. They had 2 beautiful children. But suddenly, every house they applied for had just been sold or needed unexpected repairs." Lena's face had gone pale. "Redlining." "Exactly." Rosa nodded. "Miguel finally got proof, a memo in his rejection file marking his application with a special code. But before he could file a complaint, he was laid off from the mill. No reason given. The family had to move away to find work." Jack's mind was racing. "The same mill that Whitford's trying to reopen now?" "The very same," Rosa confirmed. "And guess who was the regional VP for Whitford back then?" Lena's eyes widened. "Charles Morton, the same VP I'm investigating now." She pulled out a notebook, flipping pages frantically. "He oversaw 3 plant closures in minority-heavy communities. I knew about the layoffs, but not about the housing discrimination angle." "Harlan and Morton worked together," Rosa said grimly. "One keeping people out of homes, the other pushing them out of jobs. Very convenient partnership." Pastor Ruth spoke up. "And now Harlan's been buying properties near the old mill site. Been quite secretive about it, too." "How do you know that?" Jack asked. "Church secretary does title searches part-time at the courthouse," Pastor Ruth said with a small smile. "She notices things." Lena was scribbling furiously. "If we can prove Harlan and Morton are still working together on this mill deal." She looked up at Jack, real hope in her eyes for the first time since the break-in. That's why I brought Rosa here, Pastor Ruth said. You two were ready to give up, but the truth has a way of coming out, especially when good people refuse to stay silent. Rosa reached into her large purse and pulled out a faded folder. Miguel's original rejection documents. I kept copies all these years. Never knew why exactly. Maybe I was waiting for the right moment, the right people to finally do something about it. Lena took the folder with trembling hands. Rosa, this is... Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Rosa said firmly. Just promise me you'll fight smart. Harlan's got friends everywhere, and Morton's got Whitford money behind him. Jack looked at Lena, seeing the familiar determination returning to her face. She met his gaze, and something passed between them, a shared resolve, a silent agreement that they weren't done yet. We won't quit, Jack said, still holding Lena's eyes. Whatever it takes. Pastor Ruth smiled, satisfied. Good. Now finish your cinnamon rolls. Can't fight corruption on an empty stomach. The evening sun cast long shadows through Maya's bedroom window as she moved methodically around her room, feather duster in hand. School had been rough lately, with whispers following her through the hallways, but cleaning always helped clear her mind. It was something her mom had taught her: when things feel messy inside, tidy up what's around you. She paused at her dresser, where the restored music box sat among her treasures. The wooden box gleamed softly in the fading light, its intricate carvings telling stories of flowers and vines. Maya ran her fingers over the smooth surface, remembering how she and Lena had spent hours fixing it together, carefully cleaning each tiny gear and spring. Maybe some music would help, she murmured to herself, reaching for the winding key. But as she lifted the box, something rattled inside, something that didn't sound like the delicate mechanism they'd repaired. Maya's brow furrowed. She turned the box over carefully, examining it from every angle until she noticed a nearly invisible seam in the decorative base. Her small fingers pressed and probed until there was a soft click. A hidden compartment popped open, revealing a tiny micro SD card. "Dad," she called out, already heading for the stairs. "Lena, I found something." She found them in the kitchen, where Jack was brewing coffee and Lena was absently stirring a cup of tea. Both looked up at her excited entrance. "Look what was in the music box." Maya held out the memory card like it was made of gold. Lena's eyes widened. She set down her tea so quickly it sloshed onto the table. "Oh my God," she breathed. "I completely forgot I hid that backup weeks ago." "Backup?" Jack asked, moving closer. Lena took the tiny card with trembling fingers. "It's a habit I developed after the first time someone tried to steal my evidence. I make copies and hide them in random places. The more ordinary looking, the better." She gave a shaky laugh. "I thought I was being paranoid. But, is it the same stuff that was on your hard drive?" Jack asked, hope creeping into his voice. Lena nodded. "Everything. The emails proving the VP's discrimination policies, recordings of board meetings where they discussed targeting specific communities." She looked up at Maya with wet eyes. "You brilliant girl, you just saved months of work." Maya beamed, but then her expression turned serious. "But what if they try to steal this one too, or break in again?" Jack pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down, his face thoughtful. "We need to share it somewhere public, somewhere they can't just sweep it under the rug." "The church hall," Lena said suddenly. "Pastor Ruth hosts that weekly community dinner tomorrow night. Half the town will be there." "And the state investigator," Jack added. "The one looking into the mill deal, she always comes for Ruth's apple pie." He drummed his fingers on the table. "If we give her the evidence with plenty of witnesses." "They can't pretend it didn't happen," Lena finished. She reached for her phone. "I should call my father. As much as it pains me to admit it, having a corporate lawyer present would help make this official." Maya watched her dad and Lena plan, their voices gaining strength and purpose. The heavy cloud that had hung over the house since the break-in seemed to lift slightly. She picked up the music box again, studying its innocent appearance. "Sometimes the best hiding places are right in front of everyone," she said softly. Lena paused her phone call preparations and smiled at Maya. "That's exactly right. And sometimes the best allies are the ones you least expect." She glanced at Jack. "Like a mechanic who stops to help a stranger in a storm. Jack's ears reddened slightly, but he smiled back. Or a corporate heiress who turns out to have more courage than the whole town put together. They spent the next hour carefully copying the files, triple-checking that everything was intact. The evidence was even better than Lena had remembered. Crystal-clear audio of the VP discussing demographic adjustments to the workforce, emails outlining targeted layoffs, and documentation of Harlan Pike's involvement in the scheme. "We should make sure Rosa and Pastor Ruth know what's coming," Jack said, checking his watch. "They deserve to be prepared, and their support will matter to the town." Lena nodded, already reaching for her coat. "I'll go talk to Ruth. She'll know how to handle this without causing panic." "I'll call Rosa," Jack offered. "She's got more reason than most to want the truth out there." Maya carefully placed the music box back on her dresser, its secret compartment now empty, but its significance forever changed. What had started as a simple repair project, just something to pass the time with their mysterious guest, had turned into so much more. She watched from her window as Lena walked quickly toward the church, her father heading to his truck to drive to Rosa's house. The sun was setting over Willow Ridge, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Tomorrow would change everything. But for now, there was just the quiet satisfaction of having found a way forward when all seemed lost. The music box sat silent on her dresser, no longer just a reminder of her mother, but now a symbol of how sometimes the most precious things, truth, justice, family, need to be protected in unexpected ways. Morning light filtered through the kitchen windows, catching dust motes in its golden beams. The rich aroma of fresh coffee filled the air as Jack, Elena, and Maya sat around the worn wooden table, surrounded by scattered papers and half-empty mugs. Elena wrapped her hands around her steaming cup, her elegant fingers tense against the ceramic. "We need to do this right," she said quietly. "No more hiding, no more shadows." Jack nodded, pushing his own mug aside to spread out a blank sheet of paper. "The evidence needs witnesses. Lots of them." He glanced at the music box sitting in the center of the table, their unexpected saving grace. Maya, still in her pajamas with wild bedhead, reached for the orange juice. "What about a party?" she suggested between sips. "Everyone comes to parties." Elena's eyes lit up. "Maya, that's brilliant." She turned to Jack. "Not just any party, a potluck, at the church hall." "A potluck?" Jack raised an eyebrow, but then understanding dawned on his face. "Of course, nobody turns down Miss Rosa's tamales, or Betty Wilson's apple pie, and the church hall. Neutral ground," Elena finished. "Sacred space, in more ways than one." The kitchen clock ticked steadily as they refined their plan. Elena pulled out her phone, fingers hovering over the keypad. "I should call the state investigator. Officer Martinez has been following the discrimination case for months." Jack leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Are you ready for this? Once we start." "There's no going back," Elena completed his thought. She squared her shoulders. "I've been running from my name long enough. Time to use it for something good." Maya got up to refill their mugs, the coffee pot scraping against the warmer. "Will people come? After everything?" "They'll come," Jack assured her, though his eyes held a flicker of uncertainty. "This town runs on curiosity, if nothing else." The phone on the counter buzzed, making them all jump. Elena checked the screen and her face tightened. "It's my father." The kitchen fell silent, except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Elena stared at the phone for 3 rings before answering. "Hello, Dad." Jack and Maya watched as Elena listened, her expression shifting from guarded to surprised. She put the phone on speaker and set it on the table. "Already have the legal team preparing statements." Daniel Whitford's cultured voice filled the kitchen. "If you're going public with the evidence, you need proper backing. Let me help, Elena. Let me stand with you this time." Elena's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her coffee. "Why now?" "Because you're my daughter," Daniel replied, his usual corporate polish cracking to reveal something rawer underneath. "And because you're right. What happened at those plants? It wasn't just bad business. It was wrong." Jack watched Elena's internal struggle play across her face, years of complicated history warring with present need. Maya slipped her small hand into Elena's free one and squeezed. "Okay," Elena finally said, "but on my terms. This isn't about saving the Whitford name, it's about making things right." "Understood," Daniel agreed, and for the first time, Jack heard genuine respect in the older man's voice. "Send me the details, I'll be there." After the call ended, Elena sat back, looking slightly dazed. "Well, that was unexpected." "Good? Unexpected?" Jack asked carefully. Elena nodded slowly. "I think so. Having his legal team behind us, it means they can't bury this again." She straightened up, new determination in her eyes. "Maya, can you call Pastor Ruth? We need the church hall for tomorrow evening." Maya bounced up, already reaching for the phone. "On it!" While Maya chatted with Pastor Ruth in the background, Jack and Elena drafted a simple message for the flyers. No accusations, no desperate pleas, just an invitation. "Potluck, stories, all welcome," Jack read aloud. "Simple, true." "The best things usually are," Elena replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. Pastor Ruth arrived an hour later, carrying a stack of bright yellow paper and her trademark practical optimism. "The hall's all yours," she announced, settling into a kitchen chair. "And I've already called the phone tree. You know how Margaret loves to spread news." They spent the next hour printing flyers, Maya carefully feeding paper into the ancient printer while Jack and Elena took turns signing them. Pastor Ruth made notes about table arrangements and electrical outlets for the investigators' recording equipment. "I'll post these around town," Pastor Ruth said, gathering up a stack of flyers. "People trust church letterhead, even the ones who haven't darkened our doors in years." She paused at the door, her kind eyes serious. "Whatever happens tomorrow, remember, the truth has its own power. We just have to give it room to work." As the morning wore on, they could already hear cars slowing down as they passed the garage, word of the potluck spreading through Willow Ridge's well-oiled rumor mill. Maya kept peeking out the window, reporting on who drove by. "Even Mr. Pike just passed," she announced. "He looked mad." "Let him come," Elena said quietly, touching the music box. "The truth doesn't change just because you don't like it." Jack watched her, struck by the transformation from the rain-drenched stranger he'd pulled from a burning car. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She caught him staring and raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Nothing," he said, smiling. "Just thinking about how sometimes the biggest storms bring the best changes." Pastor Ruth returned around noon looking pleased. "Flyers are up. Miss Rosa's already planning her tamales, and I heard Betty Wilson muttering about needing more apples." She sat down at the table and helped herself to coffee. "Now, let's talk about seating arrangements. Some folks shouldn't be too close to others if we want to keep the peace." They spent the afternoon planning, preparing, and praying, though not all of them would have called it that. The music box sat on the table between them, its tiny hidden compartment holding enough truth to change everything. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. For now, they had coffee, hope, and each other. Pastor Ruth gathered her things as the sun began to set. "Remember," she said at the door, "sometimes the best sermons don't need words at all. Sometimes they just need people brave enough to stand up and tell their story." The afternoon sun streamed through the stained glass windows of Willow Ridge Community Church's hall, casting patches of colored light across the long tables laden with steaming casseroles and homemade pies. The familiar scents of Ruth's famous mac and cheese mingled with Rosa's enchiladas and a dozen other comfort foods that spoke of home and trust. Jack stood by the entrance, wearing his cleanest flannel shirt and a welcoming smile that didn't quite hide his nervousness. He shook hands and greeted each person who came through the doors, from old Mr. Peterson, with his worn veteran's cap, to Sarah from the diner with her 3 young kids in tow. "Good to see you, Tom," Jack said, clasping the mechanic from the shop across town. "Thanks for coming." The hall hummed with conversation and the musical clink of plates being filled. Some folks clustered in small groups, whispering and casting glances toward Elena, who moved through the crowd with grace. She wore a simple blue dress that made her look more like a neighbor than an heiress, stopping to compliment dishes and chat with everyone she passed. Maya darted between tables, helping older guests carry their plates and beaming at the praise for her hand-lettered name cards at each place setting. Her ponytail bounced as she moved, reminding Jack so much of her mother that his heart squeezed. "Jack." Pastor Ruth appeared at his elbow, her gray hair neat under a modest headband. "How are you holding up?" "Trying not to count heads," he admitted quietly. Ruth patted his arm. "I see more friendly faces than frowns. That's something." The door opened again, and Daniel Whitford stepped in. The corporate titan had traded his usual suit for khakis and a sweater, though he still carried himself with the bearing of someone used to boardrooms. A ripple of murmurs spread through the hall. Elena looked up from where she was helping arrange desserts. For a moment, father and daughter just looked at each other across the crowd. Then Elena crossed the room and, after a heartbeat's hesitation, hugged him. "Thanks for coming, Dad." Daniel's formal posture softened just slightly. "Of course." Jack watched them, noting how Daniel's hand lingered protectively on his daughter's shoulder. Whatever their differences, there was real love there, buried under years of expectations and misunderstandings. The hall filled steadily until nearly every seat was taken. Rosa sat with her grandchildren, while Tom from the hardware store shared a table with the Korean War veterans. Even a few of the mill's former workers had come, their expressions guarded but curious. Pastor Ruth moved to the small podium at the front, tapping her water glass gently for attention. The conversations gradually died down as people turned to face her. "Friends and neighbors," she began, her warm voice carrying easily through the hall, "we've gathered today to share food and fellowship, as we've done so many times before, in times of celebration and in times of trouble." She smiled, looking around the room. "Before we eat, I'd like to offer grace." Heads bowed, and Ruth's clear voice rose again. "Lord, we thank you for this food and for the hands that prepared it. We thank you for this community, even in its struggles. Give us open hearts to hear each other's truths and the wisdom to seek understanding. Amen." "Amen," echoed through the hall. As people began to eat, Ruth remained standing. "Today isn't just about sharing food," she continued. "It's about sharing truths worth telling. In this room, we're all neighbors. We all want what's best for Willow Ridge. So let's talk honestly, with respect and hope." Elena caught Jack's eye from across the room. He gave her a small nod of encouragement. They'd planned this carefully, the casual atmosphere, the familiar setting, the comfort of good food. It was harder to maintain anger with a full plate and familiar faces nearby. The door at the back of the hall opened quietly. A woman in a crisp blazer slipped in, taking a seat near the exit. Only Jack noticed her arrival. Sarah Chen, the state investigator who'd been quietly gathering evidence about the mill closure for months. She gave him a slight nod, then turned her attention to her notebook, appearing to be nothing more than another guest taking notes. Jack looked around the hall at all these people who'd shown up despite the rumors and tension. There was old Joe, who'd lost his job at the mill but still helped Jack with heavy repairs. The Thompson sisters, who ran the bakery and knew everyone's favorite treats. Even gruff Carl from the hardware store, who'd been skeptical of Elena at first but had slowly warmed to her during community repair day. These were his people. Elena's people now too, whether they knew it yet or not. Their lives were woven together through years of shared joys and sorrows, loans of sugar and spare parts, casseroles during hard times and celebrations in good ones. The afternoon light shifted, sending new patterns of color dancing across the tables. Jack caught Maya's eye as she helped serve pie, and she gave him a thumbs up. His daughter had shown more wisdom than many adults these past weeks, seeing past names and reputations to the hearts underneath. Elena moved between tables with coffee and tea, her face composed, but her hands betraying her nerves as she refilled cups. Daniel watched her from his seat, pride and concern warring in his expression. Whatever came next would change things. For Elena, for the town, for all of them. Ruth's voice rose again over the gentle clatter of forks and quiet conversation. Now, who has a truth they'd like to share? The hum of conversation and clinking silverware filled the church hall as neighbors shared potato salad and traded stories about the week's events. Rosa Delgado stood up slowly from her seat at one of the long tables, her weathered hands gripping the edge for support. The room gradually fell silent as people noticed her standing. "I have something to say," Rosa announced, her voice clear and strong despite her age. "Something I've kept quiet about for too long." She looked around the room, meeting familiar faces. 30 years ago, my brother Miguel, God rest his soul, tried to buy a house on Oak Street for his family. He had good credit, a steady job at the mill, and enough saved for a down payment. Jack watched from near the door as Rosa's words drew everyone's attention. Lena sat perfectly still at a corner table, her fingers interlaced tightly in her lap. "But someone made sure that house was suddenly no longer available," Rosa continued, her voice taking on an edge. "My brother found out later that Harlan Pike had told the seller not to accept certain kinds of buyers. Miguel and his family ended up having to move 2 towns over, away from their own flesh and blood." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few older residents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as if remembering similar stories. "And now," Rosa said, "I see the same pattern starting again. Secret deals, whispered prejudices, people trying to control who belongs here and who doesn't." The silence in the room grew heavier. Pastor Ruth stood near Rosa, offering quiet support with her presence. Lena took a deep breath and rose from her seat. She walked to the center of the room, her steps echoing on the wooden floor. Jack noticed how straight she held her shoulders, though her hands trembled slightly. "My name," she said clearly, "is Elena Whitford." Gasps and whispers erupted around the room. Someone dropped a fork with a clatter. "I came to Willow Ridge by accident, literally, when Jack Mercer saved my life on River Bend Bridge. But I stayed because I saw something worth fighting for, a community that, despite its hurts and history, still believes in doing what's right." She reached into her pocket and withdrew the micro SD card, holding it up. "This contains evidence of systematic discrimination at Whitford Holdings plants, including the old mill. It proves that our Vice President of Operations orchestrated biased layoffs targeting minority workers while making backdoor deals with local officials like Harlan Pike to profit from property speculation around closed facilities." The state investigator stepped forward from his position near the back wall, his badge catching the light. Lena handed him the card with steady hands. Jack moved to the sound system and connected his laptop. "With your permission," he said to the investigator, who nodded. The recorded board meeting filled the room through the church's speakers. The familiar voice of the Whitford VP rang out, discussing workforce optimization and demographic adjustments. Then came Harlan's voice, talking about property acquisitions around the mill site months before any public announcement. People leaned forward in their chairs, faces darkening as the evidence mounted. Daniel Whitford stood at the back, his expression grim but determined, watching his daughter. The recording continued, revealing how the VP had specifically targeted families like Rosa's brother, using terms like community character as code for discrimination. The voices discussed how to hide the pattern through careful paperwork. When the recording ended, the silence was absolute. Then an older man stood up, one of Jack's regular customers, a veteran who'd been laid off from the mill years ago. "They told me it was just numbers," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Just business. But they'd marked me for laying off before they even looked at my work record." Others began to stand, sharing similar stories. The investigator moved quietly toward the entrance, making a subtle gesture through the window. 2 deputies stepped into the hall, their badges visible. "Mr. Pike," the investigator called out, "I believe we need to have a conversation downtown." Harlan Pike, who had been sitting near the door, jumped to his feet. His usual smooth manner cracked as he looked wildly around the room. The deputies moved forward, hands on their belts. "Sir," one said firmly, "please come with us." Rosa watched from her seat, tears in her eyes but her head held high. Pastor Ruth squeezed her shoulder gently. The sound of chairs scraping and hushed voices filled the hall as people stood to watch Harlan being led out. The investigator spoke quietly into his phone, presumably calling for backup to arrest the Whitford VP. Lena remained standing in the center of the room, her face pale but composed. Jack wanted to go to her, to offer support, but he knew this was her moment to stand on her own. Daniel Whitford stepped forward then, clearing his throat. "As chairman of Whitford Holdings," he announced, "I want to be clear that we fully support this investigation and will cooperate with all authorities." He turned to his daughter. "Elena was right to bring this to light. The Campagna family has much to answer for." The afternoon sun continued to stream through the stained glass, painting the scene in patches of blue and gold. The potluck dishes sat forgotten on the tables, witnesses to a different kind of sharingon of truth and long-buried pain finally brought into the light. The investigator returned, speaking quietly with his deputies near the entrance. One deputy pulled out handcuffs as Harlan was led toward the waiting patrol car outside, his protests fading as the heavy church doors swung shut behind them. The church hall doors opened again, and all heads turned to watch as two more deputies led the Whitford VP through in handcuffs. His perfectly pressed suit and commanding presence couldn't hide his shock at being arrested in front of so many witnesses. Outside, through the windows, people could see Harlan Pike already seated in the back of a patrol car, his face red with anger. The VP's eyes locked onto Elena for a moment, his expression a mix of fury and disbelief. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away. Jack moved closer to her, his protective instinct showing in the way he positioned himself slightly ahead of her. "You've ruined everything," the VP spat as the deputies guided him past. "No?" Elena replied calmly. "You did that yourself." The room stayed silent until the sound of car doors slamming and engines starting faded away. Then the state investigator stepped forward, his badge catching the light from the overhead fixtures. He surveyed the room full of townspeople, all still processing what they'd witnessed. "What happened here today," the investigator said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "is what justice looks like when a community stands together. Each of you who came forward, who shared your stories, you've helped expose years of systematic discrimination and corruption." Pastor Ruth nodded from her place beside Rosa, who dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Around the room, other residents began to straighten in their chairs, as if physically shaking off years of imposed shame and silence. "The evidence Ms. Whitford provided, combined with your testimonies, gives us everything we need to pursue this case fully," the investigator continued. "My office will be in touch with many of you in the coming days to take formal statements." Daniel Whitford stepped forward then, his usual corporate polish tempered by something more human perhaps, humility or regret. He cleared his throat and looked directly at his daughter. "As chairman of Whitford Holdings," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of authority, but also genuine emotion, "I want to publicly state that Elena's actions represent the very best of what our company should stand for." He paused, swallowing hard. "She saw wrongdoing and refused to look away. She chose justice over convenience, and as her father, not just her chairman, I am profoundly proud of her courage." Elena's eyes widened slightly. This was more than she'd expected from her usually reserved father. Around the room, people who had been suspicious of both Whitfords began to murmur with growing approval. A town council member stood up, holding some papers. "I've just received confirmation from the State Banking Commission," she announced. "With Ms. Whitford's identity verified and the criminal investigation underway, the community trust funds have been officially released from their freeze." A wave of relief swept through the room. The trust meant real help for families who had been hurt by years of discrimination, help that wasn't just promised, but guaranteed. Jack looked down at Maya, who had been watching everything with wide eyes. He squeezed her hand gently, and she squeezed back. The pride in his expression was unmistakable as he gazed at his daughter, who had shown such wisdom in trusting Elena from the start. "Dad," Maya whispered, tugging his sleeve, "can we go thank Miss Elena? I mean, properly thank her?" Jack nodded, and they made their way through the crowd to where Elena stood talking quietly with her father. Maya didn't wait for adult formalities. She simply wrapped her arms around Elena's waist in a heartfelt hug. "Thank you for being brave," Maya said, her voice muffled against Elena's sweater. Elena's composure cracked just a little as she hugged Maya back, tears brightening her eyes. Jack watched them, his own heart full of emotions he wasn't quite ready to name. Pastor Ruth called everyone's attention, suggesting they step outside for some fresh air after such intense events. The congregation moved through the doors into the evening, where the earlier clouds had begun to break apart, revealing patches of starry sky. The night air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of late summer flowers from the church garden. Small groups formed on the lawn, talking quietly, processing everything they'd witnessed. The mood was different now, lighter, as if a heavy weight had finally been lifted from the town's shoulders. Rosa approached Elena, taking her hands in her weathered ones. "Miguel would have been proud to see this day," she said softly. "Sometimes justice takes its time, but it comes when good people refuse to stay silent." More townspeople came forward, sharing their own stories or simply offering words of support. The initial shock of Elena's true identity had transformed into something like respect, not for her family name or wealth, but for her willingness to stand with them against wrongdoing. Above them, more stars emerged as the clouds continued to part, their light touching the scene below. A community beginning to heal, a father and daughter finding their way back to trust, and a family of three discovering that sometimes the best bonds are forged in the midst of standing up for what's right. The night breeze rustled through the trees lining the churchyard, carrying away the last echoes of sirens and leaving behind the gentle sounds of neighbors talking, children laughing, and the first tentative notes of hope for a better tomorrow. The morning sun painted golden stripes across the garage floor through the open bay doors. The usual bustle of engines and tools was replaced by an unusual quiet, broken only by the gentle ticking of cooling metal and the distant melody of Maya's violin floating down from upstairs. Jack wiped his hands on a red shop rag, studying old Mr. Peterson's Buick with careful eyes. The familiar scent of motor oil and the methodical work helped ground him after yesterday's dramatic events. He'd already changed the oil and was checking the brake lines when the sweet smell of baking drifted down from the apartment. "Smells like heaven up there," Mr. Peterson commented from his usual perch on the worn waiting room chair. The elderly man had been bringing his cars to Jack for 15 years, and today was no different, despite all the excitement in town. "That'll be Lena," Jack said, smiling. "She bakes, says it helps her think." "Mr. Peterson nodded, his weathered face creasing into a knowing grin. "Smart lady. My Betty was the same way. Could always tell when something big was on her mind by how many pies showed up in the kitchen." Through the open garage doors, Jack could see people walking down Main Street talking in small groups. There was none of yesterday's tension in their postures. Instead of angry whispers and pointed fingers, he saw neighbors stopping to chat, sharing the morning news about the mill negotiations. The violin music paused upstairs, and Jack heard Maya's feet pattering across the floor, followed by Lena's warm laugh. The sound made his heart lift. "You know," Mr. Peterson said thoughtfully, "I've lived here 63 years. Seen plenty of promises about that mill. But this time feels different." He adjusted his worn baseball cap. "Maybe because it's not just promises. It's people doing the right thing, even when it's hard." Jack nodded, ducking back under the hood. "Sometimes the right thing takes a while to figure out," he said, thinking of Lena's journey to expose the truth, and his own path from suspicion to trust. The smell of fresh muffins grew stronger as footsteps came down the stairs. Lena appeared, carrying a basket lined with a checkered cloth. She wore jeans and one of Jack's old garage shirts, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, looking nothing like the corporate heiress she was supposed to be. "Fresh blueberry muffins," she announced, setting the basket on the counter. "I thought we could all use a little comfort food this morning." Mr. Peterson's eyes lit up as Lena offered him one. "Much obliged, Miss White, or I suppose it's Miss Whitford now?" "Just Lena is fine," she said, settling onto the counter stool. I think we're past formalities in this town. From upstairs, Maya's violin started again, this time playing a cheerful folk tune she'd learned at school. The music seemed to match the lightening mood in town, like a weight had been lifted. Through the garage doors, they could see Rosa Delgado walking past with her grocery bags. She waved, and Lena waved back. No hesitation, no tension, just neighbors acknowledging each other on a sunny morning. Paper says they're bringing in some independent oversight committee for the mill negotiations. Mr. Nadiations, Peterson mentioned between bites of muffin. Making sure everything's done proper this time. Lena nodded, her expression serious but hopeful. Yes, and the community trust will have a seat at the table, too. No more backroom deals. Jack finished with the brake lines and closed the hood, wiping his hands again before accepting a muffin from the basket. The first bite was still warm, tasting of summer and comfort. A group of kids on bikes wheeled past the garage, their laughter echoing off the buildings. One small boy did a wobbly wheelie, showing off for his friends. The sight made Jack smile. It was the kind of ordinary moment that meant life in Willow Ridge was finding its balance again. Maya's music drifted down once more, now playing something slow and sweet. Jack recognized it as one of her mother's favorite pieces, but for the first time in a long while, the melody didn't bring an ache to his chest. Instead, it felt like a bridge between memory and hope. "Well, Mr. Peterson said, standing up with a grateful pat to his Buick's hood. "I'd better get this old girl home. The missus will be waiting." He pulled out his wallet, but Jack waved it away. "Call it even for all the times you helped jump-start my truck last winter," Jack said. Mr. Peterson's eyes crinkled with understanding as he pocketed his wallet and headed for his car. After he drove away, Jack grabbed 2 fresh cups of coffee from the pot in the corner. He gestured toward the porch with his head, and Lena followed him outside. They settled into the old wooden chairs that had seen countless morning coffees and evening wines downs. The street before them was alive with ordinary small-town life. Mrs. Chen watered the flowers outside her alterations shop. The high school track team jogged past in matching shirts, their shoes beating a steady rhythm on the sidewalk. More kids on bikes wove between parked cars, their bells chiming. Lena cradled her coffee cup, watching it all with wonder in her eyes. "I never thought I'd find this," she said softly. "Find what?" "Peace, purpose, a place where I don't have to be anyone except myself." The morning sun warmed their faces as they sat in comfortable silence, sipping their coffee and watching life flow past. Maya's violin continued its gentle soundtrack from above, weaving through the sounds of birds, distant lawnmowers, and children's laughter. "You know," Jack said, "when I first saw your car spin out on that bridge, I thought I was just saving another stranger passing through town." He smiled into his coffee cup. "Funny how life surprises you sometimes." More kids pedaled past on bikes, racing each other down Main Street. Their shouts and laughter floated back, a reminder that some things, like the simple joy of a summer morning, remained unchanged by all the drama of the past weeks. The coffee was perfect, the morning was peaceful, and Jack couldn't remember the last time the world had felt so right. 2 weeks had passed since the potluck revelation, and Willow Ridge was transformed. Bright banners fluttered in the autumn breeze at the old mill site, their colors making the weathered brick walls seem less imposing. "Welcome to our future," read the largest banner, its letters bold against the clear blue sky. Rows of folding chairs filled what had once been the mill's parking lot, now swept clean of decades of dust and neglect. The morning sun warmed the gathered crowd. Familiar faces from every corner of town, some still carrying the wariness of recent events, others bright with hope. Jack stood near the middle of the crowd, his work boots recently cleaned but his favorite flannel shirt still bearing traces of garage work. Beside him, Elena, no longer hiding behind the name Lena, wore a simple blue dress that made her look more like a local teacher than a corporate heiress. Their joined hands spoke volumes about the changes in both their lives. "Look at Rosa up there," Elena whispered, nodding toward the makeshift stage. "She's practically glowing." Rosa Delgado sat in one of the chairs on stage, her silver hair caught in the morning light. Next to her, Pastor Ruth adjusted her reading glasses, reviewing what looked like prepared remarks. The sight of Daniel Whitford beside them, his usual corporate suit replaced by a more casual blazer, still surprised many in the crowd. Maya threaded her way through the assembled townspeople, her camera hanging around her neck. "Mrs. Chen said I could take pictures for the school newspaper," she announced proudly, snapping a shot of the stage. The device had been a gift from Elena, but Maya's eye for capturing important moments was all her own. The microphone squeaked to life as Tom Chen, the new mill manager, stepped up to speak. Unlike the previous Whitford executives, he had spent the past week walking through town, meeting people at the diner, and learning their stories. His presence drew respectful attention rather than the tense silence that had greeted corporate visitors in the past. "Today marks more than just a business transaction," Tom began, his voice carrying clearly across the lot. "It marks a commitment to doing things right." He gestured to the trust board members seated behind him. "With oversight from our community trust board, we're implementing transparent hiring practices that ensure opportunities for all our neighbors." Elena squeezed Jack's hand as her father stood to sign the formal lease agreement. Daniel's pen moved deliberately across the paper, each stroke seeming to erase another piece of the past's shadow. When he finished, he handed the pen to Rosa, acknowledging her authority as trust board chair with a respectful nod. "Who would have thought?" Jack murmured, watching Rosa sign with fierce pride. "Your father, Rosa, and Pastor Ruth working together like this." Elena leaned against his shoulder. "Sometimes the worst storms clear the air," she said softly. The crowd's applause was genuine when Pastor Ruth announced the mill would begin accepting applications next week. Jack noticed several of his regular customers already pulling out their phones, likely texting family members about the opportunity. Even Harlan Pike's most vocal supporters had gone quiet after learning how he'd planned to profit from everyone else's misfortune. Maya wandered back to them, checking the photos on her camera screen. "Pastor Ruth keeps wiping her eyes," she reported with a grin. And Mr. Whitford actually smiled when Rosa told him about her grandson applying for the engineering internship. The formal ceremony concluded with Tom Chen cutting a ribbon across the mill's newly repainted doors. As people began to move around, sharing handshakes and hopeful conversations, Maya raised her camera again. "Dad! Elena! Stand still for a second," she directed, backing up a few steps. The morning sun caught them perfectly, Jack's honest, weathered face creased in a rare, full smile. Elena's eyes bright with unshed tears of joy, their joined hands natural and unposed between them. "Say second chances," Maya called out. Jack laughed, the sound carrying over the crowd's chatter. Elena turned to him, her smile matching his own, just as Maya pressed the shutter. The moment caught them in perfect clarity, not as a mechanic and an heiress, but simply as two people who had found something unexpected and precious in each other. The flash blinked, and Maya checked the image with an approving nod. Around them, Willow Ridge continued its transformation, one small step at a time. The old mill's windows gleamed with fresh glass, reflecting back the gathered crowd, the bright banners, and the clear autumn sky, all the pieces of a town's renewal captured in the morning light. Saturday morning sunlight streamed through the garage's wide-open doors, catching dust motes that danced in the golden beams. The familiar scent of motor oil mingled with fresh coffee and Pastor Ruth's cinnamon rolls, creating an atmosphere that felt like home. Tools clinked against metal, and friendly chatter filled every corner of Mercer's garage. Jack wiped his hands on a red shop rag, surveying the growing line of people waiting with everything from rusty lawnmowers to squeaky wheelchairs. The monthly repair day had become something of a town tradition now, drawing folks from all corners of Willow Ridge. "Morning, Mrs. Henderson," Lena called out, helping an elderly woman settle into a plastic chair near the waiting area. "We'll have your sewing machine humming again in no time." Her sleeves were rolled up, and a smudge of grease marked her cheek, but her smile was bright and genuine. At the back of the garage, Daniel Whitford worked quietly, his expensive suit replaced by plain khakis and a button-down shirt. Most people didn't recognize the former corporate titan as he methodically sorted screws and helped carry tools. He seemed content in his newfound anonymity, passing wrenches to Jack when needed, and learning the simple satisfaction of fixing things with his hands. "Dad," Maya called from the office doorway. "Mr. Johnson's here with his grandson's bike." She bounded down the steps, violin case strapped to her back. She'd been practicing between helping customers, her music adding a cheerful soundtrack to the morning's work. Jack nodded, finishing up with the carburetor he was cleaning. "Tell him I'll be there in 5 minutes, sweetheart." Lena moved gracefully between workstations, her corporate boardroom skills translating surprisingly well to organizing the flow of repairs. She kept track of who needed what, making sure no one waited too long and everyone felt heard. The townspeople had stopped seeing her as Alina Whitford, the heiress, and simply knew her as Lena, the woman who helped fix their problems. "Fresh pie," Pastor Ruth's voice rang out as she entered, carrying 2 still warm apple pies. The sweet aroma drew appreciative murmurs from the waiting crowd. "And don't worry, I brought coffee too." "Ruth, you're a saint," Jack called from under a riding mower, his voice muffled but grateful. The morning progressed with steady efficiency. Daniel quietly replaced the chain on a little girl's bicycle while her mother watched, amazed at how this gentleman handled the repair with such care. Jack and Lena worked in perfect sync on a veteran's wheelchair, their movements coordinated like dancers who'd practiced for years instead of months. "Remember the first repair day?" Lena asked softly as they adjusted the wheelchair's brake cables together. "When Rosa brought in Tommy's old truck?" Jack's eyes crinkled at the corners. "Feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago, all at once." His hands moved surely over the mechanism. "Never thought fixing things could fix so much more." Maya flitted between helping customers and playing short violin pieces for waiting children. Her music filled the spaces between clanking tools and conversation, making the whole garage feel like some strange but wonderful symphony of community. Around noon, Pastor Ruth organized the food table, laying out her pies alongside casseroles and sandwiches that townspeople had brought to share. The garage became a picnic ground, with people eating on chairs, benches, and even clean workbenches. "This is what healing looks like," Ruth murmured to Lena as they watched the scene. "One small repair at a time." Daniel emerged from behind a stack of tires, where he'd been helping an elderly man with his walker. His face was touched with something that looked like peace, so different from the stern corporate mask he'd worn for decades. He caught Lena's eye and gave her a small nod, then returned to his quiet work. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Jack and Lena tag-teamed a complicated lawnmower repair, their heads bent together over the engine. Their hands brushed occasionally as they worked, and neither pulled away. "Socket wrench?" Jack asked, and Lena handed it to him before he finished the sentence. "Already on it?" She smiled, anticipating his needs as naturally as breathing. Maya appeared beside them, holding a familiar wooden box. The music box they'd repaired together all those months ago caught the light, its restored finish gleaming. Without a word, she placed it carefully on the counter near the register. "For good luck," she said simply, then darted away to help Pastor Ruth distribute the last pieces of pie. The music box sat there among the day's receipts and repair orders, a small reminder of how everything had changed. Its presence seemed to add something special to the atmosphere, as if it were keeping watch over all the small acts of kindness happening around it. The work continued steady and sure through the afternoon. Daniel showed a young mother how to oil her sewing machine properly. Jack taught a teenager the basics of changing oil. Lena organized a future workshop for basic home repairs, with townspeople eagerly signing up. Through it all, the music box remained on the counter, its brass key catching the light. Sometimes, when someone opened the register, its melody would play a few notes, mixing with Maya's violin, the sound of tools, and the laughter of neighbors helping neighbors. "Lena," Jack called from across the garage, "could you give me a hand with Mrs. Peterson's screen door?" She crossed the floor to him, stepping around scattered tools and smiling children. They worked together to rehang the door, their movements natural and coordinated, while Mrs. Peterson told them stories about the town's history. The scene was nothing like the corporate boardrooms Lena had known, nothing like the careful power plays of her past life. Here, grease-stained hands and honest work spoke louder than any business deal. Here, in this garage filled with broken things being made whole again, she had found something real. Maya's violin music drifted through the air, a hopeful tune that seemed to make everyone work a little lighter, smile a little broader. Pastor Ruth moved through the crowd with coffee refills and kind words, while Daniel continued his quiet repairs in the background, finding his own path to redemption through simple acts of service. And through it all, the little music box kept its gentle vigil from the counter, a reminder of how something broken could become beautiful again, how the smallest repair could lead to the greatest healing. The late August air hung sweet and gentle over Willow Ridge Park as the sun dipped toward the horizon. String lights crisscrossed overhead between tall oak trees, their warm glow reflecting off plates of half-eaten pie and empty lemonade glasses. Red-checkered tablecloths fluttered in the evening breeze, and the murmur of happy conversation filled the cooling air. Jack stood near the makeshift stage, really just a flat patch of grass marked off by hay bales, and adjusted his collar. He wasn't used to wearing button-down shirts, but Lena had picked this blue one out special for tonight's town picnic. His eyes found her in the crowd, elegant in a simple sundress, chatting with Rosa Delgado near the dessert table. Maya paced behind the hay bales, violin case clutched tight against her chest. Her new white dress swished around her knees as she moved, and Jack could see her lips moving, counting beats, just like she always did before performing. "You've got this, kiddo," Jack said softly, reaching out to squeeze her shoulder. Maya looked up at him with nervous eyes. "What if I mess up the hard part?" "Then you'll keep playing, just like we practiced." Lena appeared beside them, her smile gentle. "Remember what we said about mistakes?" "They're just unexpected solos," Maya repeated, managing a small grin. Pastor Ruth stepped up to the microphone stand, tapping it twice. The crowd quieted, faces turning toward her. "Friends and neighbors," she began, her voice warm, "we've got a special treat tonight. Our own Maya Mercer is going to play for us." Encouraging applause rippled through the gathering. Jack saw familiar faces everywhere. Mr. Chen from the hardware store, the Wilson twins from Maya's class, even old Mr. Set Peterson, who usually never left his porch. In the back, partially hidden by shadow, Daniel Whitford stood quietly, a rare small smile on his usually stern face. Maya took her place in front of the microphone, tucking the violin under her chin. Her bow hovered for a moment, then descended. The first notes of Amazing Grace floated out across the evening air, clear and pure. Jack felt his chest tighten with pride as Maya's confidence grew with each measure, her body swaying slightly with the melody. Lena's hand found his, squeezing gently. When he glanced at her, he saw tears shining in her eyes, but her smile was radiant. The music swelled, Maya adding careful embellishments just as she'd practiced for weeks. The crowd sat transfixed, some closing their eyes, others nodding in time to the familiar hymn. As the final note faded into the twilight, there was a moment of perfect silence before applause erupted. Maya's face broke into a huge grin as she bobbed a quick curtsy. People stood, cheering, and Rosa called out, "Brava, Pequeña!" The band that had been setting up behind the hay bales began to play, a slow, sweet melody that Jack recognized from his own teenage years. Without warning, Maya bounced over and gave him a gentle shove toward Lena. "Dance with her, Dad," she insisted, eyes twinkling. "I didn't practice all summer, just so you two could stand around." Lena laughed, the sound as musical as Maya's violin had been. "Well, Mr. Mercer," she asked, holding out her hand, "care to dance with a reformed corporate heiress?" "I suppose I could manage that," Jack replied, taking her hand and leading her to the cleared space in front of the band. Other couples joined them as Jack pulled Lena close, one hand at her waist, the other clasped with hers. They swayed together, and Jack marveled at how natural it felt, how right. The string lights cast soft shadows across Lena's face as she looked up at him. "Remember the first night we met?" she asked softly. "In the rain? Hard to forget pulling someone from a burning car." Jack said, though I didn't expect that rescue to change everything. For the better, I hope? There was still a touch of uncertainty in her voice. Before Jack could answer, they were interrupted by well-wishers. Mrs. Davidson, who ran the flower shop, touched Lena's arm. "We're so glad you stayed," she said warmly. "What you did for this town, standing up to those executives, setting up the trust, it means everything." Others joined in, forming a loose circle around them as they danced. "My Tommy got hired at the new mill last week," called out Ben Tucker. "Fair wages, too. And my Maria's starting her coffee shop thanks to the trust," Rosa added, beaming. The band shifted to another slow song. Jack pulled Lena closer, feeling her relax against him as they turned slowly under the lights. More couples filled the dance floor. Pastor Ruth with Mr. Song, Jen, Rosa with her teenage son, even Daniel awkwardly accepting Mrs. Davidson's invitation for a dance. Maya appeared beside them, her violin safely packed away. She watched them dance for a moment, then wrapped her arms around both their waists, joining their slow movement. "Feels like we're a family now," she said softly, her head resting against Lena's side. Jack pulled his truck into the garage's driveway, the headlights sweeping across the familiar weathered sign before clicking off. The evening had been perfect: the town picnic, Maya's violin performance, and dancing with Lena under those twinkling lights. Now, in the quiet of late night, the three of them walked from the truck toward the garage's side door, their footsteps crunching softly on the gravel. Maya yawned, clutching her violin case. "That was the best night ever," she said, leaning against Jack's side. "You played beautifully, sweetheart," Lena said, reaching out to smooth Maya's hair. "I think you moved everyone to tears with that piece." "Even Mr. Harrison was crying," Maya said with a sleepy giggle, referring to her usually stoic music teacher. "Dad, can I go up to bed?" Jack kissed the top of her head. "Of course. Don't forget to brush your teeth." They watched as Maya climbed the stairs to their apartment above the garage, her footsteps fading into the night. Jack turned to Lena, who was already walking into the garage's main work area. She moved with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged there, reaching for the light switch that illuminated the space in a warm glow. The garage looked different at night, peaceful, with shadows pooling in the corners and tools hanging in neat rows on the walls. The concrete floor still held the day's warmth, and through the wide-open main door, crickets sang their endless summer chorus. A gentle breeze carried the scent of grass and distant rain. Lena walked to the front counter where Maya had placed the music box earlier that day. Its brass surface caught the light, the intricate engravings, telling stories of their own. Jack moved to stand beside her, their shoulders touching lightly. "Hard to believe this little thing helped save the town," he said, running a finger along its edge. Maya had the right idea, calling it our good luck charm. Lena picked up the music box, turning it over in her hands. "When we fixed it together that first week, I never imagined." "That you'd end up staying?" Jack's voice was soft, curious. She nodded, setting the box back down. "I came here running away from something. Instead, I found somewhere to run to." Jack reached for the music box's winding key, his mechanic's hands gentle on the delicate mechanism. With a few careful turns, he released it. The melody began to play clear, sweet notes floating into the night air, echoing slightly in the garage's open space. "I used to wind this for Sarah," he said quietly, mentioning his late wife's name with a tenderness that spoke of healing rather than pain. Maya would dance around the kitchen while she cooked Sunday breakfast. Lena leaned against the counter, listening to the tune. "And now? Now, it reminds me that broken things can be fixed, that new memories can live alongside the old ones." He turned to face her fully. "That sometimes the best repairs happen when you least expect them." The music continued its gentle song as a car passed on the main road, its headlights briefly illuminating the garage interior before fading away. In the distance, a train whistle sounded the late freight heading north toward the city. "The trust board meets next week," Lena said, her fingers tracing patterns on the counter's worn surface. "Rosa and Pastor Ruth have such good ideas for supporting local businesses." "And your father? Will he keep coming to the monthly food pantry?" She smiled. Quietly, in the background. He's learning that sometimes the smallest actions mean the most. Jack nodded, understanding. They'd all learned that lesson over the past months. The music box played on, its melody weaving through the cricket songs drifting in from outside. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about expanding the garage, maybe adding a proper waiting room, with comfortable chairs and good coffee, a place where people can feel welcome while they wait." "Like a community space?" "Exactly. Somewhere the repair days can happen even when it rains. Where folks can sit and talk, share their stories." He paused, watching her face in the soft light. "Would you want to help design it?" The question held more than just plans for the garage, and they both knew it. Lena's eyes met his, warm and certain. "I'd love to," she said. "This place, this town, it's home now. I want to build something lasting here." She reached for his hand. "With you." Jack's fingers interlaced with hers, strong and steady. Above them, they could hear Maya moving around in the apartment, probably getting ready for bed. The music box's tune continued its gentle path through the night air, mixing with the sounds of distant crickets and the soft rustle of leaves from the oak tree outside. Through the open garage door, they could see Main Street's lampposts, casting pools of light along empty sidewalks. The old mill's silhouette stood proud against the starlit sky, no longer a symbol of loss but of renewal. The River Bend Bridge gleamed faintly in the distance, its arc over the water reminding them of where their story had begun. The music box's melody began to slow, each note stretching out as the mechanism wound down. Jack and Lena stood together in comfortable silence, watching the summer night through the garage's wide opening. A firefly drifted in, its light pulsing softly before it floated back out into the darkness. "Tomorrow's another repair day," Jack said, his voice carrying the contentment of a man who knew exactly where he belonged. "Good thing you've got a partner who knows her way around a toolbox now," Lena replied, squeezing his hand. The music box played its final notes, the sound fading into the cricket songs and distant river whispers. Through the garage door, Willow Ridge spread out before them, its streets quiet under a blanket of stars. Porch lights winked like earthbound constellations, and the river caught moonlight on its gentle curves, a silver ribbon winding through the heart of their town. They stood together at the counter, the music box silent now but holding all their stories of rescue and redemption, of a town healing, and of love growing in unexpected places. Outside, the summer night cradled Willow Ridge in its warm embrace, while inside the garage, two people who had saved each other in different ways shared the peaceful quiet of belonging. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you thought this was just the beginning, you're right. Click through and see where the story takes you next. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Mercer, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.